What's going on, everyone? It's Super Harry here. We've got something amazing for you today. What if Fawkes burned every potion in Dumbledore's office, revealing 890 love potions all labeled, for Potter, Ginny Protocol? Real quick, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join thousands of story lovers and hit that subscribe button. Alright, story time. Chapter 1, The Phoenix's Flame. A single crimson feather drifted lazily through the air of Headmaster Dumbledore's office, catching the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the arched windows. Harry Potter watched its descent, momentarily distracted from the headmaster's lengthy explanation about occlumency lessons. The feather glowed almost translucent at its edges, like a living ember. "Sir," Harry interrupted, pointing toward Fawkes's perch. "I think something's wrong with Fawkes." Dumbledore turned, his silver eyebrows rising in surprise. The phoenix was trembling, wings spread wide, his plumage brightening to an almost blinding intensity. Small flames licked along the edges of his feathers. "How curious," Dumbledore murmured, rising from his chair. "This is most unusual. Fawkes isn't due for a burning day for another month at least." Harry had witnessed the phoenix's rebirth cycle once before, but something about this seemed different. Fawkes's eyes were wide, almost panicked, and the magical bird let out a shrill cry that made the delicate silver instruments around the office vibrate in response. "Should we do something?" Harry asked, taking an instinctive step back as the heat from the phoenix became palpable. Dumbledore extended his hand toward his familiar. "Fawkes, my friend, what troubles?" The question died on his lips as Fawkes erupted into a column of flame far more intense than any normal burning day. The fire roared upward, licking the ceiling of the office, forcing both Harry and Dumbledore to shield their eyes. But instead of remaining on his perch as he normally would during a rebirth, Fawkes launched himself across the room in a blazing comet of magical fire. "Extraordinary," Dumbledore whispered, his wand now in hand though he made no move to intervene. The phoenix circled the office once, twice, leaving a trail of sparkling embers in his wake. On the third pass, he diverted suddenly toward what appeared to be a solid wall behind Dumbledore's desk. Harry watched in astonishment as the flaming bird passed directly through the seemingly solid stone. A flash of golden light erupted from within the wall, and the stone facade shimmered before dissolving completely, revealing a concealed cabinet that Harry had never noticed before. The cabinet doors burst open as Fawkes emerged, still wreathed in flame, carrying something in his talons. "No!" Dumbledore shouted, all semblance of calm vanishing as he lunged forward. But it was too late. Fawkes dropped his burden on the headmaster's desk, a small crystal vial containing a mother-of-pearl-colored liquid that shimmered with an unnatural light. The vial's stopper was sealed with wax bearing the imprint of half-moon glasses. Harry stared at it, confusion building. "Sir, what is—" The phoenix wasn't finished. He dived back into the hidden cabinet, and this time when he emerged, he carried not one but a handful of identical vials, dropping them with deliberate precision beside the first. Each bore the same seal, and each contained the same pearlescent potion. Dumbledore moved with surprising speed for a man of his age, attempting to gather the vials, but Fawkes screeched in protest. The phoenix's flames intensified, forcing the headmaster back. In the momentary distraction, Harry stepped forward and picked up one of the vials, turning it in his hand to examine a small parchment label affixed to its side. His blood ran cold as he read the neat script, "For Potter, Ginny Protocol, December 1995. "What is this?" Harry's voice was barely above a whisper. He looked up at Dumbledore, whose face had drained of color. "What is the Ginny Protocol?" Before the headmaster could answer, Fawkes made a final dive into the cabinet. This time, when he emerged, the phoenix was carrying what looked like a ledger bound in red leather. He dropped it on the desk with a heavy thud, pages splaying open. Harry glimpsed columns of dates stretching back years, alongside notations of dosages and effects. "Harry," Dumbledore said carefully, "I believe we should continue our discussion about occlumency another day." "Perhaps, no." Harry cut him off, a cold dread settling in his stomach as he reached for another vial. This one read, "For Potter, Ginny Protocol, November 1995. The next, October 1995. And another, September 1995. His hands began to shake as he realized there were dozens of vials on the desk now, each labeled with a month stretching back years, all bearing the same unsettling description. "These are love potions," Harry said flatly, recognition dawning from Slughorn's recent demonstration in potions class. The mother-of-pearl sheen was unmistakable. Amortentia. The most powerful love potion in existence. Dumbledore's silence was confirmation enough. "Why do they have my name on them?" Harry demanded, his voice rising. "What is the Ginny Protocol?" Fawkes continued his relentless mission, bringing vial after vial from the hidden cabinet, until the desk was covered with them. Hundreds of love potions, all labeled with Harry's name, all connected to Ginny Weasley. "Harry, you must understand," Dumbledore finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. "The decisions I've made have always been for the greater good. For your protection, for your future happiness." "My future happiness?" Harry repeated incredulously, picking up the ledger. He flipped through pages of meticulous notes, dates spanning back to his second year at Hogwarts. "You've been, what? Dosing me with love potions? Making me fall for Ginny?" The realization hit him like a physical blow. His feelings for Ginny, which had seemed to develop so suddenly this year, the inexplicable jealousy when he saw her with Dean, the dreams, the constant thoughts of her, none of it was real. None of it was his. "It's more complicated than that, my boy," Dumbledore said gently. "Please, sit down. Allow me to explain." "Explain what?" Harry's voice was dangerously quiet now. "Explain how you've been violating my mind. My free will." Fawkes, who had finally ceased his frantic retrievals, settled on the back of Harry's chair, his renewal complete. The phoenix was once again magnificent in his prime plumage, but his intelligent eyes remained fixed accusingly on Dumbledore. "The world you face is dangerous, Harry," Dumbledore said. "Voldemort's return has changed everything. I needed to ensure you would have stability. A reason to fight. A reason to survive. So you decided that reason would be Ginny Weasley?" Harry's incredulity gave way to anger. "You had no right. You had absolutely no right to decide that for me." "It wasn't just my decision," Dumbledore said quietly. "Molly Weasley and I believed, Mrs. Weasley knows about this." Harry felt as though the floor were crumbling beneath him. "She helped you. She wanted her daughter to be with someone who was being forced to love her." Dumbledore raised a placating hand. "No one has been forcing you to do anything, Harry. The potions were merely guiding your natural inclinations. Ensuring compatible matches. The wizarding world is small, and your options for suitable companions are limited. Ginevra comes from a good family, one already loyal to you." "Suitable companions?" Harry repeated, disgust evident in every syllable. "I'm not a pure-blooded heir looking for a politically advantageous marriage. I'm a 16-year-old who just wanted." His voice broke. "Who just wanted one normal thing in his life. One real thing." Fawkes trilled a soft, mournful note that seemed to resonate with Harry's pain. A horrible thought struck him. "Does Ginny know? Has she been part of this?" "No," Dumbledore said firmly. "Miss Weasley is as much an unwitting participant as yourself. Only Molly and I have been aware of the arrangement." Harry wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. The idea that Ginny might eventually discover that his feelings for her had been manufactured, that their relationship, whatever it might have become, was built on a foundation of magical manipulation. It was devastating. 890, came a voice from the doorway. Harry spun around to find Hermione standing there, her face pale with shock. Behind her stood Ron, his expression unreadable. "I counted the vials while you were talking," Hermione continued, stepping into the office uninvited. 890 love potions. That's more than one a week for 5 years. Miss Granger, Mr. Weasley, Dumbledore acknowledged them with a nod that betrayed no surprise at their presence. "This is a private matter that—" "No," Harry cut in. "They stay. I want witnesses for whatever explanation you think could possibly justify this." He gestured to his friends. "How did you know to come here?" "Neville saw Fawkes flying through the castle trailing fire," Ron said, his voice oddly hollow. "Word spread. When we couldn't find you, we figured you might be with Dumbledore." Hermione approached the desk, examining the vials with clinical precision despite her obvious distress. "These are dated," she noted. "Some go back to Harry's second year. Before Ginny even really knew him." "That can't be right," Ron said, finally finding his voice properly. "My mum wouldn't, she couldn't have." "I assure you, Mr. Weasley, your mother's intentions were entirely honorable," Dumbledore said. "Molly has always viewed Harry as a son. She wanted to formalize that relationship eventually, to ensure he truly became part of your family." "By tricking him?" Ron's ears were growing red, a sure sign of his mounting anger. "By slipping him love potions for my sister." "That's not honorable, that's illegal," Hermione finished. "Use of love potions without consent is prohibited under Section 9 of the Magical Consent Act of 1706. The punishment is a minimum of 5 years in Azkaban per documented instance." Her voice was steady but her hands trembled. "This many doses, it would be a life sentence several times over." Harry felt oddly detached, as though he were floating somewhere near the ceiling, watching this nightmare unfold beneath him. "Have I been taking them?" he asked. "These potions. Have I actually been consuming them?" Dumbledore hesitated just long enough for Harry to have his answer. "How?" Harry demanded. "How were you getting me to take them without me noticing?" "Your pumpkin juice," Dumbledore admitted. "The house elves were instructed to add a few drops to your morning beverage on specified days. The potion is nearly tasteless when properly diluted." Ron made a strangled noise. "So every time Harry mentioned liking Ginny this year, it wasn't real," Harry finished, a hollow ache spreading through his chest. "None of it was real." "That's not entirely accurate," Dumbledore said. "Love potions cannot create genuine love, Harry. They can only enhance existing attraction, create infatuation based on underlying compatibility. What you feel for Miss Weasley has its roots in authentic emotion. Don't," Harry's voice was sharp. "Don't try to justify this. You've been tampering with my mind for years. Making me think I felt things I didn't. Making me believe I was falling for Ginny naturally when it was all just chemistry. Potion ingredients." Fawkes let out another mournful trill, this one seemingly directed at Dumbledore. The Phoenix's rebirth had returned him to full splendor, but he made no move to return to his perch near the headmaster. Instead, he remained firmly positioned at Harry's side. "Why?" Hermione asked, her analytical mind clearly trying to process the irrational. "Why go to such elaborate lengths? Why Ginny specifically?" Dumbledore sighed, suddenly looking every one of his considerable years. "Please, sit down. All of you. This explanation requires context." "I'll stand," Harry said coldly. Ron and Hermione remained standing as well, forming a united front with Harry. "Very well." Dumbledore moved behind his desk but did not sit either. "When Voldemort returned, I recognized that Harry would need every possible support system to survive what was coming. The prophecy makes it clear, his path leads inevitably to confrontation with Tom Riddle. Such a burden requires anchors to the world, reasons to fight, to live. So you decided to manufacture one," Hermione said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "I decided to nurture a connection that showed promise," Dumbledore corrected gently. Miss Weasley's infatuation with Harry was obvious from the moment they met. And her experience with Tom Riddle's diary gave her unique insight into the enemy Harry would face. They share a connection through that experience that no one else could provide. "She was 11, Harry said flatly. "When Tom Riddle possessed her, she was 11 years old. That's not a connection, that's a trauma. And you decided to exploit it. I decided to transform it into something positive, Dumbledore countered. Molly approached me after the chamber incident, concerned about her daughter's ongoing nightmares, her withdrawal. She wondered if perhaps Harry, who had saved Ginny, might be able to help her recover. So this was Mrs. Weasley's idea? Ron asked, his face contorted with confusion and betrayal. The initial conversation was hers, Dumbledore acknowledged. But the methodology was my suggestion. Molly merely wanted to encourage a friendship between Harry and Ginny. I saw the potential for something more substantial, something that could anchor Harry to the world when the time came for him to face his destiny. Harry let out a bitter laugh. My destiny. Right. So in addition to marking me for death against Voldemort, you thought you'd also control who I fall in love with? Was anything in my life ever actually mine to choose? Harry, Dumbledore's voice was soft with regret. I have made many mistakes in my long life. Perhaps this will prove to be among them. But I acted out of care for you, and yes, out of strategic necessity. Strategic necessity? Hermione repeated. You're talking about Harry's life, not a chess game. When the stakes are the future of the wizarding world, Miss Granger, every element becomes strategic, Dumbledore replied. Harry's connection to the Weasley family provides him protection, emotional support, and powerful allies. I already had that without you dosing me with love potions. Harry exploded. The Weasleys took me in, made me part of their family, long before you started this Ginny protocol. Ron's face had gone from red to ashen. 890 potions, he muttered. 5 years of dosing my best mate to make him fall for my sister. Merlin's beard, did my dad know? George and Fred. Bill. Only your mother was aware, Dumbledore assured him. She felt it best to limit the knowledge to protect both Harry and Ginevra from unnecessary scrutiny. To hide your crimes, you mean, Hermione said coldly. A heavy silence fell over the office. Even the usual whirring and puffing of Dumbledore's silver instruments seemed subdued. I want them destroyed, Harry finally said, gesturing to the multitude of vials. All of them. And I want your word that this stops now. No more potions. No more manipulation. Harry, I must caution you against hasty decisions, Dumbledore began. The potions have been carefully calibrated to provide emotional stability during this critical time. Without them, you may experience withdrawal. Withdrawal? Harry repeated incredulously. You've made me addicted to feelings for Ginny. Not addiction in the conventional sense, Dumbledore clarified. But abrupt cessation of amortentia after prolonged exposure can cause emotional disorientation. Anxiety. Depression, in some cases. Hermione made a sound of outrage. You knew the potential side effects and did this anyway? Without his consent. I calculated the risks against the benefits, Dumbledore said simply. Harry felt a wave of nausea wash over him. Destroy them, he repeated. Now. Or I swear I'll take this entire collection to the Daily Prophet. The threat hung in the air between them. Dumbledore studied Harry's face for a long moment, perhaps searching for signs of bluff or uncertainty. He found none. Very well, the headmaster finally said, drawing his wand. With a complex gesture, he vanished all the vials from the desk, leaving only the ledger behind. The ledger too, Harry insisted. Harry, that contains important documentation of dosages that may be relevant to monitoring your health as the potions leave your system, Dumbledore objected. Hermione stepped forward, snatching the ledger before Dumbledore could stop her. I'll keep this, she said firmly. For evidence if needed, and to track any withdrawal symptoms Harry might experience. But you don't get to control his health anymore. You've lost that right. Dumbledore's blue eyes had lost their customary twinkle. He looked tired and, for perhaps the first time in Harry's experience, uncertain. What happens now? Ron asked quietly. Now, Harry said, his voice steadier than he felt, we find out if anything I thought I knew about myself was actually real. A soft knock at the door interrupted the tense standoff. Professor McGonagall entered, her sharp eyes quickly taking in the scene, Harry's rigid posture, Ron and Hermione's protective stances, Fawkes' position at Harry's side rather than with Dumbledore, and the headmaster's uncharacteristic discomposure. "Headmaster," she said crisply, "there are concerning rumors spreading through the castle about a fire in your office and some sort of potion collection being discovered." Her gaze landed on the empty desk, where traces of the pearlescent liquid still gleamed on the wood. "I see the rumors may have some basis in fact." "Minerva," Dumbledore acknowledged her with a nod. "We are addressing a private matter concerning Mr. Potter. Nothing that requires broader attention." "With respect, Headmaster," McGonagall replied, her Scottish brogue becoming more pronounced as it always did when she was upset, when half the student body is whispering about love potions and Potter in the same sentence, it has already become a matter requiring attention. Harry's stomach dropped. "People know. Word spreads quickly in Hogwarts, Mr. Potter, as you are well aware," McGonagall said. "Several students witnessed Phoenix fire emanating from this tower, and Mr. Longbottom's account of Fawkes carrying shiny bottles through the corridors has evolved considerably in the retelling." "Professor," Hermione spoke up, "there's something you should know, Miss Granger," Dumbledore interrupted, "perhaps we should address this matter privately first, before involving additional faculty." McGonagall's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Albus, what exactly has occurred here?" Harry made a swift decision. "Professor Dumbledore has been drugging me with love potions since my second year," he said bluntly. 890 doses, to make me fall in love with Ginny Weasley. Fawkes exposed his secret during an unusual burning day. McGonagall's face went slack with shock, then rapidly transformed into the most terrifying expression of controlled fury Harry had ever seen on his head of house. "Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore," she said, each name enunciated with devastating precision. "Tell me this is some kind of elaborate misunderstanding." Dumbledore sighed heavily. "It is, as with most matters in war, more complicated than it appears, Minerva." "War?" she repeated incredulously. "You're using war to justify administering love potions to a student? To a child under your care?" "The potions were mild," Dumbledore said, though his defense sounded weak even to Harry's ears. "Carefully formulated to guide rather than control. To nurture natural compatibility." "Natural compatibility?" McGonagall's voice rose slightly, her Scottish accent becoming even more pronounced. "You've violated every ethical standard we uphold at this institution. The trust placed in you as headmaster. The magical consent laws. The greater good require difficult choices," Dumbledore replied, his own voice gaining a hardness Harry rarely heard. "Choices I do not expect everyone to understand or approve of." "The greater good," McGonagall repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. "How convenient that the greater good always seems to align with whatever manipulation you've decided is necessary." She turned to Harry, her expression softening slightly. "Potter, you should go to the hospital wing immediately. Madame Pomfrey needs to assess whether there's been any damage from prolonged potion exposure." "I feel fine physically," Harry said. "Just, betrayed." "Nevertheless," McGonagall insisted. "Magical compounds can have subtle effects that aren't immediately apparent. Especially." Her lips thinned to nearly disappear, "especially when administered without proper oversight for years." "I monitored the dosages carefully," Dumbledore interjected. "The formula was of my own design, specifically tailored to Harry's magical signature." "That makes it worse, not better." McGonagall snapped. "Experimental potions administered to a minor without consent or medical supervision. The Board of Governors will have questions, Albus. As will the Department of Magical Law Enforcement." The implications of McGonagall's words hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just an ethical breach, it was potentially criminal. "Professor," Harry said quietly, "I don't know if I want everyone to know about this." Not yet. I need time to figure out what parts of me are real and what parts were manufactured. McGonagall's stern expression softened further. I understand, Potter. But certain authorities will need to be informed, regardless. This goes beyond Hogwarts regulations. We should tell Ginny first, Ron said suddenly, his voice rough. Before rumors reach her. She deserves to hear the truth before the whole school is gossiping about it. Harry's stomach clenched at the thought of that conversation. What would he say to her? Sorry, but it turns out I only thought I liked you because the headmaster and your mother have been drugging me for years. How could either of them ever look at each other the same way again? Mr. Weasley is right, McGonagall agreed. Miss Weasley should be informed privately. Would you like me to arrange that, Potter? Harry shook his head. No. I should be the one to tell her. He glanced at Ron. We both should. Dumbledore cleared his throat. Harry, I must caution against hasty revelations. Miss Weasley's emotional state has always been somewhat fragile regarding you. Learning about the potions could be devastating for her. More devastating than building a relationship on lies. Harry countered bitterly. She deserves the truth, however painful. Sometimes the truth does more harm than good, Dumbledore said softly. Sometimes mercy lies in allowing certain illusions to remain intact. That's not your decision to make, Hermione cut in. Not anymore. The office fell silent again, broken only by the occasional soft note from Fawkes, who still perched protectively near Harry. Potter, Weasley, Granger, McGonagall finally said, please proceed to the hospital wing. I'll inform Madame Pomfrey to expect you. Her gaze, when it returned to Dumbledore, was glacial. Albus and I have matters to discuss. Harry hesitated, reluctant to leave the ledger behind. I've got it, Hermione murmured, patting her bag where she had stowed the red leather book. Let's go. As they turned to leave, Fawkes launched himself from his position near Harry, circled the office once, and then settled onto Harry's shoulder. The weight of the phoenix was substantial, but somehow comforting. Warm without burning. It seems Fawkes has made his loyalties clear, McGonagall observed, a note of satisfaction in her voice. Dumbledore watched the phoenix's choice with an unreadable expression. Fawkes has always had a mind of his own, he said quietly. Perhaps he believes he is protecting you, Harry. Maybe he's just siding with the truth for once, Harry replied, before turning his back on the headmaster and walking out of the office with his friends, the phoenix still perched on his shoulder like a fiery guardian. The walk through Hogwarts to the hospital wing was surreal. Students stopped and stared at the sight of Harry Potter with Dumbledore's phoenix on his shoulder. Whispers followed in their wake, fragments of speculation reaching their ears. Love potions, Weasley girl, Dumbledore's secret stash, this is a nightmare, Ron muttered. How did word spread so fast? Hogwarts, Hermione replied simply. And apparently Neville saw quite a bit before coming to find us. They found Neville waiting anxiously outside the hospital wing, shifting from foot to foot. When he spotted them, his round face flooded with relief. Harry. I've been looking everywhere for you. I saw Fawkes carrying all these bottles, and then people started saying they were love potions, and that they had your name on them, and, he broke off, noticing the phoenix still perched on Harry's shoulder. Oh. That's, wow. It's a long story, Neville, Harry said wearily. And unfortunately, most of the rumors are probably true. Neville's eyes widened. So Dumbledore was really, yes, Harry cut him off, not wanting to hear it stated again. Listen, have you seen Ginny anywhere? She was in the library with Luna when I left to look for you, Neville said. But that was almost an hour ago now. Harry nodded his thanks. We need to find her before the rumors do. I'll help, Neville offered immediately. Luna too, if we can find her. We can split up, cover more ground. Thanks, Neville, Harry said, genuinely grateful for the uncomplicated loyalty. Just, If you find her, don't tell her anything. Just let her know I need to talk to her. Privately. Neville nodded solemnly. Of course. And Harry? Whatever's happened, we're with you. DA members stick together, right? Despite everything, Harry felt a small surge of warmth at the reminder that his world extended beyond this betrayal, that he had built connections that were genuine, friendships forged through shared struggle rather than magical manipulation. Right, he agreed. Thanks. As Neville hurried off, Madame Pomfrey emerged from the hospital wing, her normally composed features tight with concern. Potter, she said, ushering them inside. Professor McGonagall sent a Patronus ahead. I've prepared a private examination area. The hospital wing was mercifully empty of other patients. Pomfrey led them to a bed in the far corner, drawing curtains around it for privacy. I'll need to run a full toxicological assessment, she said briskly. Love potions, especially in prolonged doses, can cause a range of physiological effects. Is it dangerous? Hermione asked. What Dumbledore's been doing? Pomfrey's lips pressed into a thin line reminiscent of McGonagall's. Intentionally administered love potions are always dangerous, Miss Granger, regardless of dosage or intent. They interfere with the brain's natural chemistry, the heart's natural rhythms. But without knowing the specific formula. She trailed off, glancing at the phoenix still perched on Harry's shoulder. Is Fawkes staying for the examination? As if in answer, the phoenix trilled softly and settled more firmly on Harry's shoulder. I think that's a yes, Harry said, finding strange comfort in the magical creature's loyalty. Is that a problem? Not at all, Pomfrey replied. Phoenix tears have powerful healing properties. His presence may actually be beneficial if we discover any adverse effects. The medical examination that followed was thorough and uncomfortable. Pomfrey cast diagnostic spells that made Harry's skin tingle unpleasantly, drew blood samples that she subjected to various potions that changed color in patterns that meant nothing to Harry but caused the matron's frown to deepen, and asked increasingly personal questions about his feelings, particularly those regarding Ginny Weasley. When did you first notice romantic interest in Miss Weasley? Pomfrey asked, recording his answers on a floating parchment. Harry shifted uncomfortably. I don't know exactly. It sort of crept up on me. This year, mainly. When I saw her with Dean Thomas, I started feeling jealous. And before this year? She was just Ron's little sister, Harry said, the words painful to voice. I cared about her, but not romantically. Pomfrey nodded, making another notation. And the intensity of these feelings? Have they remained constant, or do they fluctuate? Harry thought back, trying to separate his genuine memories from what might have been potion-induced. They're stronger some days than others, he admitted. Sometimes I can hardly think about anything else, and other times, it's more in the background. That's consistent with periodic dosing, Pomfrey confirmed. Peak effects followed by gradual diminishment until the next dose. Ron, who had been unusually quiet throughout the examination, suddenly spoke up. So if Harry stops taking the potions, will his feelings just disappear? It was the question Harry had been afraid to ask himself. It's more complicated than that, Mr. Weasley, Pomfrey said. After such prolonged exposure, there will likely be a period of emotional recalibration. Some artificially enhanced feelings may fade, but genuine emotions will remain. How do I tell the difference? Harry asked, the desperation clear in his voice. How do I know what's real and what was manufactured? Pomfrey's professional demeanor softened with compassion. Time, Potter. Time and distance from the potion's influence. Your true feelings, whatever they may be, will clarify with patience. We don't have a lot of time, Hermione pointed out, her practical nature asserting itself. The rumors are already spreading. Ginny will hear something soon if she hasn't already. Miss Granger is right, Pomfrey agreed. But rushing into emotional decisions while still under the potion's influence would be unwise. I need to tell her the truth, Harry insisted. Even if I don't understand my own feelings yet. The curtains around the bed parted suddenly, revealing Ginny Weasley herself. Her face was flushed, her breathing rapid as though she'd been running, and her brown eyes were wide with confusion and the beginning traces of hurt. "Tell me what truth, Harry," she asked quietly. Harry felt his heart lurch painfully in his chest. Was that reaction real, or just another chemical effect of the potions? "Ginny," Ron began, stepping toward his sister. "How did you find us?" "Luna," she replied simply. "She said people were talking about Harry and love potions, and that you were all looking for me. She thought it might be important." Her eyes remained fixed on Harry. "Is it true? What they're saying?" Harry swallowed hard. This moment was arriving too soon, before he'd had time to prepare, to understand, to find the right words that might minimize the pain. "Miss Weasley," Madame Pomfrey intervened, "perhaps we should discuss this after I've completed Mr. Potter's examination. The situation is complicated and requires—" "No," Ginny cut her off, her voice stronger now. "I want to hear it from Harry. Now." Fawkes, who had remained silent throughout the examination, suddenly spread his magnificent wings and launched from Harry's shoulder. He circled once above them, then settled on the foot of the hospital bed, directly between Harry and Ginny. The phoenix trilled a series of notes that somehow conveyed both sadness and encouragement. "Dumbledore has been giving me love potions," Harry said finally, forcing himself to meet Ginny's eyes. "Hundreds of them. For years. They were all labeled, 'For Potter, Ginny Protocol.'" Ginny went very still, the color draining from her face. "What?" "Fawkes discovered them during an unusual burning day," Hermione explained gently. "He revealed a hidden cabinet in Dumbledore's office containing 890 vials of amortentia, all designated for Harry, all connecting to you." "That's not possible," Ginny whispered. That's horrible. Why would he?" Her eyes widened further. "My mother. She knew about this, didn't she?" The perceptiveness of the question caught Harry off guard. "Yes," he admitted reluctantly. "According to Dumbledore, it was partly her idea, after the Chamber of Secrets." Ginny made a small, wounded sound, wrapping her arms around herself as though suddenly cold. "So every time you looked at me this year, every smile, every moment I thought might mean something, it was just potions? Just my mother and Dumbledore playing puppet master?" "Ginny, I don't know what was real and what wasn't," Harry said desperately. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. Madame Pomfrey says some of it might have been genuine, just enhanced." "Enhanced," Ginny repeated bitterly. "What a nice way of saying forced." "Miss Weasley," Pomfrey interjected gently, "Mr. Potter is as much a victim in this as yourself. Neither of you consented to this interference." Ginny's eyes filled with tears she seemed determined not to shed. "Did you know?" she asked Ron abruptly. "No." Ron exclaimed. "Ginny, I swear, I had no idea. None of us did until Fawkes exposed Dumbledore's stash today." She nodded once, accepting his answer. Then, with visible effort, she straightened her spine and raised her chin. "I need to speak to our mother," she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Immediately." "Ginny," Harry began, not sure what he wanted to say but feeling the need to say something, anything, to ease the pain evident in every line of her body. "Don't," she said, raising a hand to stop him. "Please, Harry. I can't. I can't do this right now. I can't look at you and wonder which parts of you looking back at me are real and which parts were fabricated by my mother and Dumbledore. I just can't." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away, her movements stiff but determined. "Ginny, wait." Ron called, starting after his sister. "Let her go, Mr. Weasley," Pomfrey advised. "Miss Weasley needs time to process this shock, as do you all." Ron hesitated, torn between following his sister and staying with his best friend. "I should go with her," he said finally. When she confronts Mum, she shouldn't have to do that alone. Harry nodded, understanding. Go, he said. She needs family right now. Family she can trust. The implied exclusion of Molly Weasley from that category hung heavy in the air. I'll come back as soon as I can, Ron promised. And Harry. I'm sorry. I'm so bloody sorry about all of this. It's not your fault, Harry said automatically. It's my family, Ron countered. My mother. That makes it partly mine to fix, somehow. As Ron departed, Pomfrey resumed her examination, though Harry found it increasingly difficult to focus on her questions. His mind kept replaying the look on Ginny's face, the dawning comprehension, the hurt, the anger, the moment when something that had looked like hope died in her eyes. Based on these results, Pomfrey said eventually, reviewing her notes, you've been receiving small but consistent doses of a modified amortentia variant. The formula appears designed for gradual effect rather than the immediate infatuation standard amortentia produces. Is it dangerous? Hermione asked again. Physically, the doses appear to have been carefully calibrated to avoid toxic buildup, Pomfrey admitted reluctantly. But emotionally and psychologically? She shook her head. The violation of autonomy alone constitutes severe harm. How long will it take to leave my system? Harry asked. The active components should metabolize within days without continued dosing, Pomfrey explained. But the psychological effects of long-term exposure may linger longer. You may experience mood swings, confusion, periods of emotional flatness or heightened sensitivity. But I'll eventually be normal. Back to myself. Pomfrey's expression was compassionate. You will find a new normal, Potter. Whether it resembles your pre-potion state or not will depend on many factors, including your natural feelings for Miss Weasley, your resilience, and the support system around you. Hermione reached out and squeezed Harry's hand. We'll be here every step of the way, she promised. Whatever you need. Harry squeezed back, grateful beyond words for her unwavering friendship. What happens now? He asked Pomfrey. With Dumbledore, I mean. That, came Professor McGonagall's voice as she entered the hospital wing, is currently being determined. She approached Harry's bed, her expression grave but controlled. How are you feeling, Potter? Confused, Harry admitted. Angry. Betrayed. All entirely appropriate reactions, McGonagall assured him. Madam Pomfrey, what is your medical assessment? No immediate physical danger, Pomfrey reported. But I recommend daily monitoring for at least 2 weeks as the potions clear his system, and mind healing sessions to address the psychological impact. McGonagall nodded briskly. I've arranged for a mind healer from St. Mungo's to visit tomorrow. Someone with no connection to Dumbledore or Hogwarts, to ensure complete objectivity. What about Dumbledore? Hermione asked. What's happening to him? McGonagall's expression tightened. The headmaster has been temporarily relieved of his duties pending investigation by the Board of Governors and the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Harry felt a surge of conflicting emotions at this news. Relief that Dumbledore was facing consequences, uncertainty about what it meant for Hogwarts, and a strange, unexpected pang of loss. Despite everything, some part of him still cared for the old wizard who had been his mentor and guide for years. And Mrs. Weasley? He asked. Orders have been dispatched to the Burrow, McGonagall said. Though I understand Miss Weasley has already departed via Fleur to confront her mother directly. Ron went with her, Harry explained. McGonagall nodded. Good. Family support will be important for both of them. She hesitated, then added more gently, Potter, while the investigation proceeds, you should know that you have options. If remaining at Hogwarts feels too difficult under the circumstances, arrangements can be made for you to continue your education elsewhere, at least temporarily. The thought of leaving Hogwarts, his first true home, sent a spike of panic through Harry. No, he said firmly. I'm not running away. Hogwarts isn't just Dumbledore. It's everything else too. He glanced at Hermione, at Fawkes still perched on his bed, thought of Neville and Luna searching the castle to help him. It's where my real friends are. Very well, McGonagall said, a hint of approval in her voice. In that case, I should inform you that I will be serving as acting headmistress while this situation is resolved. My first priority will be ensuring your well-being and privacy as much as possible, though I'm afraid the rumors have already spread quite extensively. I can handle rumors, Harry said, having long experience with Hogwarts gossip mill. I just need to know what's real. In myself. In how I feel. That, McGonagall said softly, is perhaps the most difficult magic of all, knowing one's own heart. But you have strength, Potter. And you have true friends. She glanced at Hermione. Those bonds will sustain you through this challenge as they have through others. Fawkes trilled in apparent agreement, the Phoenix song momentarily lifting the heaviness in the room, infusing them all with a sense that while the path ahead would be difficult, it was not impossible. There is one more thing you should know, McGonagall added. The ledger Miss Granger secured contains more than just dosing schedules. It appears Dumbledore was monitoring the effects quite scientifically, recording observations about your behavior, your interactions with Miss Weasley, even private conversations. Harry felt sick. He was spying on me too. The portraits, Hermione realized suddenly. The ghosts. The house elves. He has eyes everywhere in the castle. Yes, McGonagall confirmed. And while I cannot undo that surveillance, I can promise you this, as acting headmistress, I will ensure such violations of student privacy cease immediately. Thank you, Professor, Harry said, genuinely grateful for her straightforward support. Rest now, Potter, McGonagall instructed. Tomorrow will bring many questions, from officials and from your fellow students. You will need your strength. She turned to leave, then paused. And Potter? Whatever you discover about your true feelings in the days ahead, remember this, the capacity to care, to form genuine attachments despite all you have endured, that has always been your greatest strength. No potion created that. As McGonagall departed, Harry leaned back against the hospital pillows, suddenly exhausted. Fawkes shifted closer, his warmth comforting against Harry's side. Do you want me to stay? Hermione asked quietly. Please, Harry said, not ashamed to admit he didn't want to be alone with his thoughts right now. At least until Ron gets back. Hermione settled into the chair beside his bed. We'll figure this out, Harry, she promised. One step at a time. Harry nodded, trying to believe her. Outside the hospital wing windows, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grounds of Hogwarts. One day ending, another approaching, a fitting metaphor for the transformation his life had just undergone. Everything he thought he knew about himself, about Ginny, about Dumbledore, had been irrevocably altered. As darkness fell, Harry closed his eyes, Fawkes's gentle warmth at his side and Hermione's steady presence nearby the only constants in a world suddenly turned upside down. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new revelations, perhaps new pain. But it would also bring one step closer to the truth, about the potions, about Dumbledore's machinations, and most importantly, about his own heart. Whatever that truth might be, Harry was determined to face it head-on. Because if there was one thing he knew for certain, it was this, a life built on lies, no matter how well-intentioned, was no life at all. Chapter 2, Bitter Truths. Morning arrived with unwelcome brightness, streaming through the hospital wing's tall windows and across Harry's face. He blinked awake, momentarily disoriented until the events of the previous day came rushing back. Fawkes still nestled against his side, radiating comforting warmth that had kept nightmares at bay through the night. You're still here, Harry murmured to the Phoenix, who opened one intelligent eye and trilled softly in response. He hasn't left your side, came Hermione's voice. She sat in the same chair as yesterday, though she'd clearly transfigured it into something more comfortable for sleeping. Her hair was wilder than usual, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Not even when Dumbledore himself came to try and reclaim him. Harry bolted upright. Dumbledore was here. When? Around 3 this morning. You were finally sleeping soundly, so Professor McGonagall and I intercepted him at the door. Hermione's expression hardened. He claimed he needed Fawkes for official Hogwarts business, but McGonagall reminded him rather forcefully that he's been suspended from his duties. Did he try to talk to me? He wanted to, Hermione admitted. Said he had critical information that couldn't wait. McGonagall threatened to call the Aurors if he didn't leave immediately. Harry felt a surge of gratitude for his head of house. Has Ron returned? Hermione's face fell slightly. No. I received an owl from him early this morning, though. She handed Harry a crumpled piece of parchment. H&H, things at home are worse than we imagined. Ginny confronted Mum before the Aurors arrived. Dad didn't know anything, he's devastated. Bill and Charlie came when they heard. Family emergency meeting ongoing. Will return when I can, but might be a day or two. Ginny says to tell Harry she doesn't blame him for any of this. Harry read the note twice, his stomach nodding. The Weasleys are falling apart because of me. No, Hermione said firmly. They're dealing with a betrayal by Molly, not by you. You're as much a victim as Ginny. Before Harry could respond, Madame Pomfrey emerged from her office, accompanied by a tall, thin wizard with silver-streaked black hair and sharp features softened by kind eyes. Good morning, Mr. Potter, Pomfrey greeted him. This is Healer Atticus Reed from St. Mungo's Department of Potion Damage. He specializes in cases involving mind-affecting substances. Reed stepped forward, extending his hand. Mr. Potter. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Harry shook the offered hand cautiously. You're here to check if I've been damaged. I'm here to help assess the effects of long-term amortentia exposure and guide your recovery, Reed corrected gently. With your permission, I'd like to perform some specialized diagnostic charms and discuss what you've been experiencing. Harry glanced at Hermione, who nodded encouragingly. All right, he agreed. Would you prefer privacy for this examination? Reed asked, gesturing to Hermione. She stays, Harry said immediately. I trust her. Reed nodded, seemingly unsurprised. Very well. First, I need to explain what we know about extended love potion exposure, so you understand what we're looking for. He conjured a chair beside the bed and sat, his manner conversational rather than clinical. Standard amortentia creates powerful infatuation, overwhelming, immediate, and obvious. But the formulation Headmaster Dumbledore created appears more insidious. Insidious how? Hermione asked. It was designed to create a gradual shift in emotional responses rather than an obvious obsession, Reed explained. Based on the samples recovered from the vials and the notes in the ledger, it appears the potion was calibrated to slowly redirect Mr. Potter's natural teenage emotional development toward Miss Weasley specifically. Harry felt ill. So instead of making me fall for Ginny overnight, it was rewiring my brain over years? An apt if uncomfortable description, Reed confirmed. The potion appears designed to create positive emotional associations with Miss Weasley while subtly enhancing any natural attraction that might develop. The result would feel more organic than traditional love potions, making it less likely to be detected or questioned, even by the subject himself. That's horrifying, Hermione whispered. Indeed, Reed agreed grimly. The ethical violations are extreme, made worse by the fact that the formula was experimental. The long-term effects of such sustained exposure are largely unknown. But you can reverse it, right? Harry asked. Get this influence out of my system. Reed's expression turned cautious. We can certainly help your body clear the active components of the potion. But emotional responses formed over years aren't simply erased, even when they've been magically influenced. Your mind has been creating memories and associations under this influence for a significant portion of your formative years. "So I'm permanently damaged," Harry concluded flatly. "Not damaged," Reed corrected. "Changed, perhaps. But so is everyone by their experiences, magical or otherwise. Our goal is to help you distinguish between authentic emotions and those that may have been artificially enhanced, then make your own informed choices moving forward." The examination that followed was more thorough than Madame Pomfrey's initial assessment. Reed cast complex diagnostic charms that created shimmering, multicolored auras around Harry's head, chest, and throat, his emotional centers, as the healer explained. He drew blood samples that he subjected to potions that bubbled and changed colors and patterns that seemed to confirm his suspicions. Throughout, he asked probing questions about Harry's feelings toward not just Ginny but everyone in his life. "Have you noticed changes in how you perceive other potential romantic interests since your feelings for Miss Weasley developed?" Reed asked. Harry thought about it. "I had a crush on Cho Chang last year. It was pretty intense for a while, but it faded after we went on one disastrous date. And this year? I haven't really thought about Cho at all," Harry admitted. "Or anyone else, really. Just Ginny." Reed made a note. "Have you experienced unusual jealousy regarding Miss Weasley?" The question triggered an immediate flash of memory, the monster in his chest roaring when he saw Ginny kissing Dean Thomas. The intensity of that reaction had surprised even him at the time. "Yes," Harry admitted. "It felt extreme. Almost like I wanted to hurt Dean, which isn't like me at all." Reed nodded as though this confirmed something. "That's consistent with the possessiveness effect of amortentia variants. Even in diluted forms, they tend to provoke territorial responses." The questioning continued for nearly an hour before Reed finally set aside his quill and diagnostic tools. "Based on everything I've observed," he said, "you've been under the influence of a subtle but persistent emotional manipulation charm delivered via a modified amortentia base. The good news is that the active ingredients are already beginning to clear from your system." "And the bad news?" Harry asked, bracing himself. "The neural pathways that have formed over years of exposure won't simply disappear," Reed said candidly. "You may experience emotional volatility as your brain chemistry recalibrates. Confusion about your authentic feelings. Possibly even withdrawal symptoms similar to addiction, though likely milder given the formulation." "How long will this last?" "The acute phase should pass within 2 weeks," Reed estimated. "The deeper psychological adjustment may take months. I'd like to see you 3 times a week during the initial phase, then weekly thereafter." "I've got exams coming up," Harry pointed out. "And Quidditch. And Voldemort trying to kill me, as usual. I don't have time to be emotionally unstable." Reed's lips quirked slightly. "Unfortunately, Mr. Potter, your brain chemistry is unlikely to accommodate your schedule preferences. But there are steps we can take to mitigate the effects." The healer outlined a treatment plan involving calming drafts to be taken during particularly volatile episodes, meditation techniques to help distinguish between authentic and manufactured emotional responses, and regular sessions with Reed himself to process the psychological impact of the betrayal. Most importantly, Reed concluded, you need honest communication with those closest to you, particularly Miss Weasley, once you both feel ready for that conversation. The thought of facing Ginny again made Harry's stomach clench painfully. "I don't think she'll want to talk to me anytime soon." "Perhaps not," Reed acknowledged. "But eventually, you'll both need clarity to move forward. Just remember that rushing that process could do more harm than good." After Reed departed, promising to return the following day, Madame Pomfrey finally deemed Harry stable enough to leave the hospital wing. However, she added sternly, "You are to return immediately if you experience any unusual symptoms, emotional or physical." Harry agreed, eager to escape the confines of the medical ward despite his trepidation about facing the rest of the school. As he and Hermione prepared to leave, Fawkes launched from the bed and settled on Harry's shoulder once more. "Is he coming with me?" Harry asked, surprised. "It appears so," Pomfrey said, looking equally bemused. Phoenix loyalty is a rare and powerful thing, Mr. Potter. I wouldn't question it if I were you. The walk from the hospital wing to Gryffindor Tower felt like running a gauntlet. Students stopped and stared openly, conversations halting mid-sentence as Harry passed with Fawkes on his shoulder. The whispers that followed were no longer bothering with subtlety. Said there were almost 1,000 potions, Dumbledore and Mrs. Weasley planned it all, wonder if anything he felt was real. Hermione walked beside him, her chin raised defiantly, occasionally shooting glares at the more obvious gossipers. Just ignore them, she murmured. They'll find something else to talk about eventually. No, they won't, Harry replied quietly. Not when it's about me. They had almost reached the portrait hole when a familiar voice called out from behind them. Potter. Harry turned to find Draco Malfoy approaching, flanked as usual by Crabbe and Goyle. Harry tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his wand. A confrontation with Malfoy was the absolute last thing he needed right now. Whatever you're about to say, Malfoy, save it, Harry warned. I'm really not in the mood. To his surprise, Malfoy halted a respectful distance away, his typical sneer absent. Relax, Potter. I'm not here to mock you. Even I have standards. Harry blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected response. Since when? Since love potions stopped being funny, Malfoy replied, his voice uncharacteristically serious. My mother was nearly victim to a similar scheme when she was at Hogwarts. It's not something decent wizards joke about. Hermione was staring at Malfoy as though he'd grown a second head. Are you actually showing empathy, Malfoy? A flash of the familiar disdain crossed Malfoy's face. Don't get carried away, Granger. I still think Potter's an attention-seeking prat most of the time. His expression sobered again. But no one deserves to have their will tampered with that way. Not even you, Potter. Before Harry could formulate a response to this bizarre turn of events, Malfoy reached into his robes and withdrew a small vial of clear liquid. What's that? Harry asked suspiciously. Neutralizing agent, Malfoy replied. Family recipe. Works against most mind-influencing potions, including Amortentia variants. My mother insisted I carry it after what nearly happened to her. He held the vial out toward Harry, who made no move to take it. You expect me to drink something you're offering? Harry asked incredulously. After everything that's happened? Malfoy rolled his eyes. Have Granger tested if you don't believe me. Or don't take it at all. I'm just offering because. He hesitated, seeming almost uncomfortable. Because what Dumbledore did crosses lines that shouldn't be crossed. Even between enemies. Hermione tentatively accepted the vial. I'll analyze this before Harry takes anything, she said firmly. Malfoy nodded, then added, the effects of long-term love potions don't disappear overnight, Potter. They linger. Make you question everything. The neutralizer helps clear your head faster. A ghost of his familiar smirk returned. Though in your case, that might not be saying much. With that parting shot, apparently unable to maintain sincerity for too long, Malfoy turned and walked away, Crabbe and Goyle trailing after him looking confused by the entire exchange. What just happened? Harry asked, staring after his longtime rival. I think, Hermione said slowly, carefully pocketing the vial, Malfoy just showed a glimmer of basic human decency. I'm as shocked as you are. When they finally entered the Gryffindor common room, conversation died instantly. Every eye turned toward Harry and the Phoenix still perched regally on his shoulder. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Neville stood up from his chair by the fire and walked directly to Harry. How are you doing? He asked simply, no hint of morbid curiosity in his voice, just genuine concern. Something tight in Harry's chest loosened slightly. Been better, he admitted. But I'll manage. Neville nodded as though this were perfectly reasonable. We saved you breakfast, he said, gesturing to a plate on a side table. Figured you might not want to face the Great Hall yet. Thanks, Neville, Harry said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. This small exchange seemed to break the tension. Other Gryffindors approached cautiously, offering awkward but seemingly sincere words of support. That's bloody awful what Dumbledore did, Seamus said frankly. Me ma'am always said love potions should be banned outright. Is it true Fawkes has chosen you now? Asked a wide-eyed second year, pointing to the phoenix. I'm not sure chosen is the right word, Harry replied, reaching up to stroke Fawkes's warm feathers. He's just sticking around for now. Phoenix loyalty is incredibly rare, Hermione explained to the gathered students. They only bond with those of exceptional moral character. Harry shot her a grateful look, recognizing her attempt to reshape the narrative from victim of potioning to worthy of Phoenix loyalty. It was a small thing, but it helped restore a measure of dignity to a situation that had left him feeling utterly powerless. As they settled into chairs by the fire, Harry finally asked the question that had been gnawing at him. What's happening outside Hogwarts? Is the Daily Prophet reporting on this yet? Hermione and Neville exchanged uncomfortable glances. It's the front page, Neville confirmed, passing over a folded newspaper. Harry's stomach dropped as he saw the headline sprawled across the Prophet, Boy Who Lived Betrayed, Dumbledore's Love Potion Scandal Rocks Wizarding World. Beneath it was a split image, one side showing Harry at the Triwizard Tournament, the other showing Ginny at a Quidditch match, with animated potion vials flowing between them. The byline, predictably, read Rita Skeeter. How did she get the story so fast? Harry groaned. The Prophet has always had sources inside Hogwarts, Hermione said grimly. And this is exactly the kind of scandal Skeeter lives for. Harry forced himself to read the article, grimacing at Skeeter's characteristically sensationalized prose. In a shocking betrayal that has stunned the wizarding community, this reporter can exclusively reveal that Albus Dumbledore, long-revered headmaster of Hogwarts and supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, has been systematically administering love potions to Harry Potter, the boy who lived, for over 5 years. The nefarious scheme, apparently designed to force young Potter into a relationship with Ginevra Weasley, daughter of Ministry employee Arthur Weasley, was uncovered when Dumbledore's own Phoenix familiar, Fawkes, exposed a hidden cache of 890 love potions during an unprecedented magical rebellion against his master. The Phoenix literally turned against Dumbledore, reports a Hogwarts student who witnessed the aftermath. It was as if the magical creature could no longer tolerate being associated with such dark manipulation. Sources close to the investigation confirmed that Molly Weasley, matriarch of the Weasley family and longtime Dumbledore supporter, was complicit in the plot, which has been dubbed the Ginny Protocol, in documentation recovered from Dumbledore's office. It appears to have been an elaborate conspiracy to control Potter's romantic future, says an anonymous Ministry official. The implications are disturbing not only for Potter himself but for what it reveals about Dumbledore's willingness to manipulate those under his care. The scandal raises troubling questions. What other aspects of Potter's life has Dumbledore been controlling? Was the headmaster's interest in the boy who lived ever truly benevolent, or has Potter been merely a pawn in Dumbledore's greater schemes? Minerva McGonagall, deputy headmistress, has assumed temporary leadership of Hogwarts while the Department of Magical Law Enforcement conducts a full investigation. Dumbledore has been temporarily stripped of his positions pending the outcome. Neither Potter nor Miss Weasley could be reached for comment, but sources describe both teenagers as devastated by the revelation. For more on love potion regulations and their controversial history, see page 4. For an exclusive analysis of Dumbledore's fall from grace, see page 7. Well, that could have been worse, Harry said, folding the paper and tossing it aside. How exactly? Hermione asked incredulously. Skeeter actually got most of the facts right for once, Harry pointed out. Though she couldn't resist implying Dumbledore has been controlling other aspects of my life too. Hasn't he? Neville asked quietly. The question hung in the air, uncomfortable in its perceptiveness. Harry had been so focused on the love potion revelation that he hadn't fully processed its wider implications. If Dumbledore was willing to manipulate his romantic life, what else might he have influenced? His friendships? His classes? His confrontations with Voldemort? That's a question for another day, Hermione said firmly, seeing Harry's expression. One crisis at a time. Their conversation was interrupted as the portrait hole swung open, revealing Professor McGonagall. The common room fell silent again as she made her way directly to Harry. "Mr. Potter," she said briskly, though her eyes conveyed sympathy. "Two matters require your immediate attention. First, Aurors Shacklebolt and Tonks are here to take your official statement regarding the potions. They're waiting in my office." Harry nodded, having expected this. "And the second matter?" McGonagall's expression softened slightly. "Arthur Weasley has arrived. He would like to speak with you privately before the Aurors begin their formal questioning." Harry's pulse quickened. Arthur Weasley had always been kind to him, a father figure he respected deeply. The thought of facing him now, with this terrible knowledge between them, made Harry's throat tighten. "Is he? How is he?" Harry asked. "Devastated," McGonagall answered honestly. "But not with you, Potter. Never with you." Reluctantly, Harry rose to follow McGonagall. Fawkes adjusted his position but made no move to leave Harry's shoulder. "Would you like me to come with you?" Hermione asked. Harry considered it briefly but shook his head. "I think I need to face Mr. Weasley alone." He attempted a weak smile. "Besides, you need to analyze Malfoy's potion. Make sure he's not trying to poison me on top of everything else." The walk to McGonagall's office felt interminable. Harry's mind raced with possible scenarios, all painful. What could he possibly say to Arthur Weasley? How did you look a man in the eye after discovering his wife had been conspiring to drug you into loving his daughter? When they reached the office door, McGonagall paused. "Shacklebolt and Tonks are giving Mr. Weasley privacy for your conversation. Take whatever time you need. When you're ready for the Aurors, simply open the side door." She hesitated, then added, "Remember, Potter, none of this is your fault." With that, she opened the door and ushered Harry inside before discreetly withdrawing. Arthur Weasley stood by the window, gazing out at the Hogwarts grounds. He looked like he had aged a decade overnight, his normally cheerful face drawn with exhaustion, his thinning hair disheveled as though he'd been repeatedly running his hands through it. When he turned at Harry's entrance, his eyes were bloodshot from what appeared to be hours of weeping. "Harry," he said softly, his voice hoarse. "Mr. Weasley," Harry replied, standing awkwardly just inside the doorway. "I'm sorry about all of this." Arthur crossed the room in 3 quick strides and, to Harry's complete surprise, pulled him into a tight embrace. Fawkes fluttered off Harry's shoulder to perch on a nearby bookshelf, watching silently. "Don't you dare apologize," Arthur said fiercely. "Not you. Never you." He pulled back, hands gripping Harry's shoulders as he looked him directly in the eyes. "I need you to know, Harry, I had no knowledge of what Molly was doing. None whatsoever." "I believe you," Harry said immediately, and he realized he truly did. Arthur Weasley's integrity had never been in question. Arthur's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you," he whispered. "Though I'm not sure I deserve your trust. I should have known. I should have seen the signs." "What signs?" Harry asked, genuinely curious. "I didn't notice anything, and I was the one being potioned." "Molly's insistence on preparing your food personally whenever you visited," Arthur said, guiding Harry to a chair and taking one opposite him. "Her unusual interest in your love life. The way she would subtly discourage you from mentioning any girl except Ginny." He shook his head. "I thought it was just a mother's natural matchmaking tendency. I never imagined." His voice broke, and he took a moment to compose himself before continuing. "I confronted her the moment the Aurors arrived at the Burrow. She didn't deny it, Harry. She admitted everything. Said it was for your own good, for Ginny's future, for the stability of the family." Anger flashed across Arthur's normally gentle features. As if a relationship built on potions and lies could ever be stable. What happens now? Harry asked. With Mrs. Weasley, I mean. Arthur's expression grew grim. She's been taken into custody pending formal charges. The case against her is substantial. The ledger alone contains years of documented evidence. He hesitated. The Aurors found additional potions at the burrow. Molly had been preparing to send more for your Easter holiday. Harry felt sick. And Dumbledore? Also in custody, though given his power and connections, the Ministry has taken extra precautions. His wand has been confiscated, and he's being held in a specially warded section of the Ministry. They sat in silence for a moment, both processing the enormity of the situation. How's Ginny? Harry finally asked, the question that had been weighing heaviest on his mind. Arthur's face crumpled slightly. Struggling, he admitted. She's angry, confused, hurt. Feels violated, in her own way. The idea that her mother tried to manufacture your feelings for her, it's devastating for a young woman. I never wanted to hurt her, Harry said miserably. I don't even know what I actually feel anymore. What's real and what's just potions? Give yourself time, Harry, Arthur advised gently. And give Ginny time too. This isn't something that can be rushed or forced. A shadow of pain crossed his face. We've all had enough of forcing where this is concerned. What about Ron? And the rest of your family? Ron is processing, Arthur said carefully. He's torn between loyalty to his mother and his sense of right and wrong. Bill and Charlie are furious with Molly. The twins have barely spoken since they learned the news. Percy. He sighed. Percy sent an owl saying this confirmed everything he'd suspected about Dumbledore's inappropriate influence, though he managed to make it sound like this somehow vindicated his abandonment of the family. I'm so sorry, Harry said again, feeling the full weight of how this revelation was fracturing the family that had shown him nothing but kindness. I never wanted any of this. None of this is your doing, Harry, Arthur said firmly. The blame lies solely with Molly and Albus. His expression softened. What I need you to know, what I came here to tell you, is that regardless of what happens with the legal proceedings, regardless of the choices you and Ginny make about your relationship moving forward, you will always be welcome in my home. You are family to me, Harry. Not through potions or manipulation, but through the bonds we've formed naturally over these years. Tears pricked at Harry's eyes. Thank you, he managed. That means more than I can say. Arthur reached out and squeezed Harry's shoulder. Now, he said, his voice steadying, are you ready to speak with the Aurors? I can stay if you'd like, as a supportive adult presence. Harry nodded gratefully. I'd appreciate that. The interview with Shacklebolt and Tonks was thorough but conducted with surprising gentleness. Tonks, her hair a subdued blue rather than her usual vibrant pink, seemed particularly upset on Harry's behalf. They recorded his statement with a dictation quill, asked clarifying questions about the discovery of the potions, and explained the legal process that would follow. Given the high-profile nature of those involved, Shacklebolt explained in his deep, reassuring voice, the Wisingamot has expedited the case. Preliminary hearings will begin next week. Will I have to testify? Harry asked. Most likely, Tonks confirmed. But we'll try to make it as painless as possible. You can provide memories for the pensive rather than recounting everything verbally if that's easier. And Ginny? Harry asked. Will she have to testify against her own mother? Shacklebolt and Tonks exchanged glances. That's being determined, Shacklebolt said diplomatically. As a minor and potential secondary victim, there are additional considerations. When the interview concluded, Arthur embraced Harry once more. I'll be staying at the Three Broomsticks for a few days, he told him. If you need anything at all, send word, and I'll be here immediately. After Arthur and the Aurors departed, Harry remained in McGonagall's office, emotionally drained. Fawkes returned to his shoulder, trilling softly. "What do I do now, Fawkes?" Harry asked the phoenix. "How do I move forward from this?" The magical bird had no verbal answer, but he pressed his warm head against Harry's cheek in what felt like solidarity. McGonagall returned, bringing tea that Harry suspected was laced with a mild calming draught. "The Aurors informed me that you handled the questioning with remarkable composure," she said, taking the seat Arthur had vacated. "I've had practice being questioned about terrible things," Harry replied with a humorless smile. "It's becoming a yearly tradition." McGonagall's expression softened. "Potter. Harry. I want you to know that I've arranged for you to have access to my office whenever you need privacy from the attention of your classmates. The password is dignity." "Thank you, Professor," Harry said, genuinely moved by her consideration. "Additionally," McGonagall continued, "while I cannot change your class schedules entirely, I've instructed your professors to excuse you from any assignments or activities you feel unable to complete in the immediate future. Your well-being takes precedence over academics at the moment." Harry nodded, though the thought of special treatment made him uncomfortable. "I'd rather keep busy, honestly. Sitting around just gives me more time to think about everything." An understandable sentiment, McGonagall acknowledged. "In that case, perhaps we should discuss the Quidditch captaincy. Under the circumstances, you might prefer to temporarily delegate those responsibilities to another team member." Harry considered this briefly before shaking his head. "No. Quidditch is one of the few things that's always been entirely mine. I don't want to give that up." McGonagall's lips curved in what might have been a small, proud smile. "Very well. Practice resumes tomorrow, then, if you feel ready." "I do," Harry confirmed, already feeling slightly more grounded at the thought of returning to the familiar routine of Quidditch training. "Though I'm not sure how the team will react to all of this." "Your teammates stand with you, Potter," McGonagall assured him. "Miss Bell sent word from St. Mungo's expressing her support, and Mr. Weasley, the twins, that is, have threatened creative retribution against anyone who makes your situation more difficult." Despite everything, Harry felt a small flicker of warmth at the loyalty of his friends. It was something real to hold on to amid all the uncertainty. As Harry left McGonagall's office, Fawkes still perched regally on his shoulder, he found Hermione waiting in the corridor, pacing anxiously. "How did it go?" she asked immediately. "About as well as could be expected," Harry replied. "Mr. Weasley was incredibly kind, considering." Hermione's expression was sympathetic. "Of course he was. Arthur Weasley is a good man. The Aurors are moving quickly with the case," Harry continued as they walked. "Preliminary hearings start next week." "That's unusually fast for the Wisengamot," Hermione observed. "Shacklebolt said it's because of who's involved. Dumbledore, the boy who lived, and all that." They had reached a quiet courtyard, empty of other students. Harry sank onto a stone bench, suddenly exhausted despite having been awake for only a few hours. Hermione sat beside him, pulling a small vial from her pocket, Malfoy's potion. "I analyzed it," she said. "It's legitimate. A neutralizing agent specifically designed to counter amortentia and similar potions. It won't instantly clear everything from your system, but it should accelerate the process and help stabilize your emotions during withdrawal." Harry stared at the clear liquid. "Why would Malfoy help me?" "I've been thinking about that," Hermione said slowly. "He mentioned his mother nearly became a victim of love potions. I did some research during your meeting with the Aurors. Apparently, when Narcissa Black was at Hogwarts, a rival pureblood family attempted to use amortentia to secure a marriage alliance with her instead of with the Malfoys. So this is personal for him," Harry realized. "Love potion use crosses certain boundaries that even traditional pureblood families consider taboo," Hermione explained. "It violates bloodline consent, the idea that magical lineages should join willingly, not through manipulation." Harry considered the vial with new understanding. "Do you think I should take it?" "Healer Reed should approve it first," Hermione said cautiously. But from my analysis, it appears to be exactly what Malfoy claimed, something that could help you recover more quickly. Before Harry could respond, a commotion from the nearby corridor drew their attention. Raised voices echoed off the stone walls, one of them painfully familiar. "Don't care who authorized it, you're not keeping me from seeing my brother." Ron burst into the courtyard, his face flushed with anger and exertion. Behind him trailed a harried-looking Professor Flitwick. "Mr. Weasley, please. Visitors must be properly logged in." Flitwick's protestations died as he spotted Harry and Hermione. "Ah, Mr. Potter. It seems your friend was quite determined to reach you." Ron's anger dissipated at the sight of Harry. "Harry," he breathed, relief evident in his voice. "You're all right." "I'm fine," Harry assured him, standing to meet his friend. "Or as fine as I can be, anyway." Flitwick, apparently deciding his presence was no longer required, discreetly withdrew with a sympathetic nod to Harry. Ron approached cautiously, his eyes flicking to Fawkes on Harry's shoulder. "He's still with you, then?" "Hasn't left my side," Harry confirmed. An awkward silence fell between them, weighted with unspoken questions and fears. "I didn't know," Ron finally blurted. "I swear on Merlin's grave, Harry, I had no idea what my mother was doing." "I know," Harry said immediately. "I never thought you did." Some of the tension drained from Ron's shoulders. "Dad said you were decent to him." "Considering everything, that means a lot." "Your dad's always been good to me," Harry replied simply. "That hasn't changed." Ron nodded, then glanced at Hermione. "Have you told him yet?" "About the others?" Harry's stomach dropped. "What others?" Hermione shot Ron a warning look. "I was waiting until he'd finished with the Aurors." "What others?" Harry repeated more firmly. Ron and Hermione exchanged a look that made Harry's anxiety spike. "The Aurors searched Dumbledore's private quarters at the Ministry," Ron explained reluctantly. "They found more ledgers. Not just about you and Ginny. There were similar protocols for other students," Hermione continued softly. "Other arrangements Dumbledore was orchestrating." Harry felt lightheaded. "Who?" "Mostly children of Order members or prominent light families," Ron said. "Matching them with partners Dumbledore deemed appropriate or strategically beneficial." "Was I?" Hermione's voice was barely audible. "Was I one of them?" Ron's face contorted with discomfort. "Yeah," he admitted. "You were. We both were." "The Harmony Protocol," Harry guessed, feeling sick as the pieces clicked together. All the times Dumbledore had encouraged his friendship with Hermione, the knowing twinkle in his eye when they were together. Ron shook his head. "No, actually. It was the Weasley Security Protocol. Dumbledore he was planning to nudge you and me together, Hermione." His ears burned red with embarrassment and anger. "To secure the Granger intellect for the light side and ensure Potter's confidant remains aligned with Order interests." Hermione paled. That's horrible. As if I'm just a resource to be allocated." "The potioning hadn't started yet," Ron hastened to add. "The ledger showed it was scheduled to begin next term. Low doses in your pumpkin juice, just like Harry's." A thought struck Harry with horrible clarity. Was that why Mrs. Weasley was always so cold to Hermione? Because she knew Dumbledore wanted her for you instead of me? Ron's expression confirmed it. "The Aurors found correspondence. She argued against the pairing initially, said Hermione was too ambitious for me, whatever that means. But Dumbledore convinced her it was for the best." "How many others?" Harry asked, his voice hollow. How many other people was he planning to manipulate this way? "Dozens," Ron admitted. "Some already implemented, others still in planning stages. Neville and Hannah Abbott. Luna Lovegood and Rolf Scamander, though he's years older and not even at Hogwarts. Dean Thomas and Padma Patil. It's social engineering, Hermione said, disgust evident in her voice. Creating the next generation of light families according to his vision. Harry thought he might be sick. The scale of Dumbledore's manipulation was beyond anything he'd imagined. There's more, Ron said hesitantly. The investigations turned up other things. Compulsion charms on your relatives to amplify their worst tendencies toward you. Suppression wards on your magic when you were younger. Memory modifications to certain Order members who questioned his decisions regarding you. Stop, Harry whispered, overwhelmed. Just, stop. I can't process any more right now. Ron fell silent immediately, looking stricken. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have dumped it all at once. No, Harry said, drawing a steadying breath. I needed to know. I just need time to digest it. The three sat in silence for a long moment, the magnitude of Dumbledore's betrayal expanding around them like a toxic cloud. How's Ginny? Harry finally asked, returning to his most immediate concern. Ron's expression grew complicated. She's coping. In her own way. She went to Shell Cottage with Bill this morning. Said she needed space from the family for a bit. Is she angry with me? Harry asked, dreading the answer. No, Ron said firmly. Not with you. She's furious with Mum and Dumbledore. Hurt. Confused. He hesitated. She asked me to give you something, actually. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a sealed envelope. Said it was private. Harry accepted the envelope with trepidation, Ginny's neat handwriting spelling out his name on the front. I should give you privacy to read that, Ron said, rising. I need to check in with McGonagall anyway, get permission to stay overnight. You're staying? Harry asked, surprised. Course I am, Ron replied as though it were obvious. You're my best mate. You think I'd abandon you now? The simple loyalty in the statement nearly undid Harry completely. Thanks, he managed. After Ron departed, Hermione squeezed Harry's hand. Do you want me to go too? So you can read Ginny's letter privately? Harry shook his head. Stay. Please. I don't think I can face whatever's in here alone. With trembling fingers, he broke the seal and unfolded the parchment. Dear Harry, I hardly know how to begin this letter. Everything I thought I understood about us has been shattered, and I'm still trying to gather the pieces. First, I need you to know that I had no knowledge of what my mother and Dumbledore were doing. The idea that they would manipulate your feelings, violate your autonomy that way, disgusts me beyond words. I would never have consented to such a scheme, no matter how much I once thought I wanted your attention. Because I did want it, Harry. That's the cruel irony in all of this. My feelings for you have always been genuine, embarrassingly so, as I'm sure you remember from my elbow-in-the-butterdish days. To discover that they tried to manufacture reciprocation through potions rather than letting whatever might develop between us happen naturally, it's a betrayal I'm still struggling to process. I don't blame you for any of this. How could I? You're as much a victim as I am, perhaps more so. I can only imagine how violated you must feel, how confused about what parts of your feelings might be real and what parts artificially induced. I don't know what happens next between us, Harry. I don't know if we can salvage anything from this mess. What I do know is that we both need time, time to heal, time to discover what's genuine, time to reclaim our autonomy. So I'm giving us that time. I've gone to stay with Bill and Fleur for a while. Being at the Burrow is too painful right now, with the ghost of my mother's betrayal haunting every corner. When I return to Hogwarts, I hope we can talk properly. Not about a relationship, not yet. But about moving forward, about finding our own paths based on truth rather than manipulation. Until then, please take care of yourself. And know that whatever you're feeling, anger, confusion, betrayal, relief, or anything else, it's valid. No one gets to tell you how to feel anymore. Especially not me. With sincere care, Ginny. Harry read the letter twice, his emotions a tangled mess of relief, sadness, and lingering confusion. Wordlessly, he passed it to Hermione, who read it with an expression of growing respect. "She's handling this remarkably well," Hermione commented softly. "With maturity and compassion. She shouldn't have to handle it at all," Harry said bitterly. "None of this should have happened." "No," Hermione agreed. "But it did. And now you both get to decide what happens next, on your own terms." Harry nodded, carefully refolding the letter and tucking it into his robes. "I don't even know what I want anymore. How can I, when I can't trust my own feelings?" "That's what time is for," Hermione reminded him gently. "And you have people who care about you, genuinely care about you, to support you through it." As if to emphasize her point, Fawkes trilled softly from his perch on Harry's shoulder, the Phoenix song washing over them with a sense of healing possibility. "I should take Malfoy's potion to heal her, Reed," Harry said, picking up the vial they'd set aside. "If it can help clear my head faster, I want to try it." "We'll go together," Hermione decided. "Then perhaps the room of requirement? We can ask it for a peaceful space, away from curious eyes." Harry agreed gratefully, and they made their way back into the castle. The whispers continued to follow them, but somehow they seemed less intrusive now, background noise rather than piercing accusations. Healer Reed, after careful analysis, approved Malfoy's neutralizing agent as a supplemental treatment. "It's an uncommon but recognized remedy," he explained. The Black family was known for their expertise in potion antidotes, ironically because they were often the targets of such attempts themselves. Harry consumed the potion under Reed's supervision, grimacing at its bitter taste. The effect wasn't immediate or dramatic, but a subtle clarity began to spread through his mind, like fog slowly lifting from a landscape. "You may experience intensified emotional volatility for the next 24 hours, Reed warned. "As the artificial influences recede, authentic feelings, including anger, grief, and confusion, may surface more strongly." "Wonderful," Harry muttered. "More emotional chaos. Just what I needed." Reed smiled sympathetically. "Consider it a purging process. Uncomfortable but necessary for healing." By the time Harry and Hermione reached the room of requirement, the predicted emotional volatility was beginning to manifest. One moment Harry felt almost calm, the next a wave of fury would crash over him at the thought of Dumbledore's manipulations. Tears would threaten without warning, followed by periods of emotional numbness so complete it was as though he were observing himself from a distance. The room had provided exactly what Hermione requested, a peaceful sanctuary resembling a blend of the Gryffindor common room and the Burrow's living room, but with large windows overlooking an impossible view of mountains and forest. A fire crackled in the hearth, comfortable armchairs awaited them, and a table held tea and sandwiches. "The room always knows exactly what we need," Hermione observed as they settled in. "I wish it could tell me what I'm actually feeling," Harry said, staring into the flames. "What's real and what isn't? What are you feeling right now?" Hermione asked gently. Harry considered the question seriously. "Angry," he admitted. "But it's different from before. Clearer somehow. Less, tangled up with other emotions." He ran a hand through his perpetually messy hair. "And sad. For what might have been if they'd just let things happen naturally. For Ginny, who deserved better than to be a pawn in their game. For the Weasleys, whose family is being torn apart because of this. Those all sound like genuine emotions to me," Hermione observed. "Natural responses to what's happened." "What about you?" Harry asked suddenly. "How are you dealing with finding out you were next on Dumbledore's list?" Hermione's expression darkened. "I'm horrified," she admitted. "The idea that someone I respected so deeply would view me as breeding stock for his grand design. That he would rob me of agency in something as personal as who I might develop feelings for." She trailed off, clearly struggling to articulate the depth of the betrayal. "I'm sorry," Harry said quietly. "This all started because of me, because Dumbledore was so fixated on controlling my life that he extended it to everyone around me. That's not your fault, Harry, Hermione said firmly. Dumbledore's obsession with control is his own flaw, not yours. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling fire and Fawkes' occasional soft trills as the Phoenix explored the room. What happens tomorrow? Harry finally asked. And the day after that? How do I just go on with normal life after this? One moment at a time, Hermione advised. Focus on what you know is real. Quidditch. Classes. Friendships that have nothing to do with Dumbledore's schemes. And Voldemort, Harry added grimly. Let's not forget him in all this drama. Actually, Hermione said hesitantly, there's something else in the Ministry findings you should know. Something Ron didn't mention earlier because it was too much at once. Harry's stomach clenched. What now? The prophecy, Hermione said gently. The one Dumbledore told you about after Sirius died. The Aurors found his original notes about it. There's evidence he edited what he shared with you. Harry stared at her, momentarily speechless. Edited how? We don't know the full details yet, Hermione admitted. But apparently there were additional lines he chose not to reveal, lines that might have given you more options, more agency in facing Voldemort. Harry laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. Of course there were. Heaven forbid Dumbledore give me complete information about my own destiny. The Department of Mysteries is retrieving the original prophecy record, Hermione continued. Since the version in the Hall of Prophecy was destroyed, they're accessing their deep archives. You'll have the right to hear it in full, without Dumbledore's curation. Harry nodded, too emotionally drained to muster further outrage at this new revelation. Add it to the list of betrayals, he said wearily. At this point, I'm almost numb to it. That's the potion withdrawal talking, Hermione said gently. The numbness is temporary. Just like the confusion and the anger will eventually become manageable. Before Harry could respond, a soft knock came at the door of their sanctuary, a door that hadn't been visible when they entered. Fawkes flew to perch above it, head tilted curiously. Who could that be? Harry wondered. The room shouldn't be accessible to anyone else while we're using it. Hermione rose cautiously. Perhaps it's Ron, or Neville. They might have been looking for us. When she opened the door, however, it revealed Luna Lovegood, her pale eyes wide and dreamy as ever, a basket covered with a cloth in her hands. Hello, she said serenely. The Nargles told me you might need these. Without waiting for an invitation, she glided into the room, setting the basket on the table. When she pulled back the cloth, it revealed an assortment of unusual items, a bundle of herbs tied with string, several crystals of varying colors, what appeared to be a dream catcher made of twisted vines and feathers, and a jar of honey-colored liquid. Luna, Hermione began, clearly torn between confusion and politeness, how did you find us? The room wanted me to, Luna replied simply, as though this explained everything. It knows you need healing beyond what St. Mungo's can provide. She approached Harry, studying him with her peculiar intensity. The Phoenix chose well, she observed, glancing at Fawkes. Fire cleanses. Purifies. Luna, Harry said, oddly comforted by her unconventional presence, what are these things? Protection against emotional manipulation, she explained, lifting the dreamcatcher-like object. Daddy and I make them. The Quibbler published instructions after the minister tried to use emotional enhancement charms during his election campaign. She handed it to Harry. Hang it above your bed. It won't stop what's already happened, but it will prevent further tampering with your feelings. Thank you, Harry said, accepting the gift. Whatever its actual efficacy, the thoughtfulness behind it was genuine. This is for cleansing, Luna continued, picking up the jar. Dilute 3 drops in your bath. It draws out external magical influences. She turned to Hermione. You should use it too. Everyone close to Harry has likely been affected by proximity to the potions. Hermione, to Harry's surprise, accepted the jar without skepticism. Is that why you're not attending classes today? You're creating these protections? Partly, Luna acknowledged. And partly because people keep asking me insensitive questions about Harry and Ginny. I thought my time would be better spent making these. People are asking you? Harry frowned. Why? Because I'm Ginny's friend, Luna said simply. And because people always assume I know secrets. A small, mysterious smile curved her lips. Sometimes I do. She distributed the remaining items, explaining each with her characteristic blend of magical theory and seemingly nonsensical asides about creatures Harry had never heard of. Throughout, Fawkes watched her with what appeared to be approval, occasionally trilling soft notes that complemented her lilting voice. You're not alone in this, Harry, Luna said as she prepared to leave. More people support you than you realize. The Phoenix showed everyone where the truth lay, and most of Hogwarts respects that, even if they're too shy to tell you directly. With that cryptic reassurance, she drifted out as ethereally as she had arrived, leaving behind her basket of protections and a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, the world wasn't entirely falling apart. That was. Hermione began. Exactly what I needed, Harry finished, surprising himself with the realization. Luna doesn't tiptoe around things or treat me like I'm fragile. She just accepts reality and moves forward. Hermione smiled. A valuable perspective, she agreed. And while I can't scientifically endorse magical dream catchers, I suppose there's no harm in having one above your bed. They spent the remainder of the afternoon in their sanctuary, joined eventually by Ron and Neville, who brought updates from the outside world. The story had indeed spread beyond Hogwarts, with the international magical press now covering the Dumbledore scandal. The Wizengamot had announced formal charges against both Dumbledore and Molly Weasley, with preliminary hearings scheduled to begin Monday. Dad's been asked to testify, Ron said, his expression troubled. Against Mum. He's going to do it. That can't be easy for him, Harry said softly. It's destroying him, Ron admitted. But he says the truth matters more than protecting her from consequences. He swallowed hard. He's filed for separation too. Said he can't stay married to someone who'd violate another person's will that way. The Weasley family, always Harry's model for what a loving family should be, was fracturing before his eyes, another casualty of Dumbledore's manipulations. As evening approached, Harry felt the day's emotional exhaustion weighing heavily on him. The neutralizing potion had indeed intensified the withdrawal symptoms, just as Reed had warned. His emotions swung wildly from moment to moment, his thoughts sometimes crystalline in their clarity, other times foggy and confused. You should sleep, Hermione advised, noticing his increasing pallor. Tomorrow will be another difficult day. Harry didn't argue. The thought of facing his classmates, of enduring more stares and whispers, of trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy when everything had changed, it was overwhelming. But he would face it, as he had faced every other challenge in his life. One moment at a time, as Hermione had suggested. As they prepared to leave their sanctuary, Fawkes returned to Harry's shoulder, a constant, warm presence that somehow made the burden lighter. Does he follow you everywhere? Neville asked, fascinated by the Phoenix's continued loyalty. So far, Harry confirmed. Though I'm not sure what happens when I need the bathroom or want to sleep. As if in answer, Fawkes trilled softly and launched from Harry's shoulder, circling the room once before disappearing in a small flash of flame. Did he just leave? Ron asked, staring at the spot where the Phoenix had vanished. I think, Hermione said thoughtfully, he's giving Harry privacy when needed, while remaining connected somehow. The theory proved correct when they returned to Gryffindor Tower. As Harry entered the dormitory, Fawkes reappeared in another flash of flame, settling on a newly manifested perch near Harry's bed, one that certainly hadn't been there that morning. Hogwarts is accommodating him, Hermione observed with fascination. The castle itself recognizes his bond with you. Harry hung Luna's dreamcatcher above his bed, feeling slightly foolish but unwilling to dismiss her genuine attempt to help. The crystals went on his nightstand, and he slipped the bundle of herbs under his pillow as instructed. "You don't really believe in that stuff, do you?" Ron asked skeptically. "I don't know what I believe anymore," Harry replied honestly. "But Luna cared enough to make them for me. That counts for something." As he prepared for bed, Harry realized with a start that this would be his first night's sleep without the influence of the love potions in years. How different would his dreams be? His thoughts? His feelings when he woke? "Whatever happens," Ron said quietly, as though reading his thoughts, "we've got your back, mate. Always have. Always will," Neville added firmly from his bed. In that moment, surrounded by friends whose loyalty had nothing to do with potions or Dumbledore's schemes, Harry felt something solid beneath his feet for the first time since Fawkes' revelatory burning day. Whatever else had been manufactured in his life, these friendships were real. Whatever happened next, with Ginny, with Dumbledore, with Voldemort, he wouldn't face it alone. With that comforting thought, he closed his eyes, Fawkes' soft, watchful presence nearby a reminder that truth, painful as it might be, was always preferable to the sweetest lie. The next several days passed in a blur of contradictions. Moments of painful clarity alternated with periods of emotional fog as Harry's system purged the remnants of years of potioning. Whispers and stares dogged his every move through Hogwarts corridors, yet many students made a point of expressing support, some verbally, others through small gestures like saving him seats in class or standing between him and the more persistent gossipers. Quidditch practice resumed, providing a blessed few hours where Harry could focus entirely on something uncomplicated. The team rallied around him with fierce loyalty, particularly after Katie Bell returned from St. Mungo's and declared that anyone who made Harry's situation harder would answer to her personally. Healer Reed continued his daily sessions, monitoring Harry's recovery with professional care tempered by genuine concern. The withdrawal symptoms peaked on the third day post-discovery, a wretched 18 hours during which Harry cycled through rage, despair, numbness, and confusing flashes of longing for Ginny that he couldn't trust as genuine. Through it all, Fawkes remained his constant companion, appearing and disappearing as needed but never truly absent. The Phoenix's presence became so familiar that Harry found himself unconsciously reaching up to stroke the warm feathers when stressed or confused, finding comfort in the magical creature's steady loyalty. On the 5th day after the discovery, as Harry was finishing breakfast in the Great Hall, having finally worked up the courage to face the communal meals, Professor McGonagall approached the Gryffindor table. "Mr. Potter," she said quietly. "Miss Weasley has returned to the castle and has requested to speak with you. She's waiting in my office, if you feel ready for that conversation." Harry's heart lurched painfully. He'd known this moment would come eventually, but he still felt woefully unprepared. "Is she alone?" "Yes," McGonagall confirmed. "Though I can remain present if you both prefer." Harry shook his head. "No, I think we need privacy for this." He glanced at Hermione, who gave him an encouraging nod. "You've been doing well with the neutralizing treatments," she reminded him. "Healer Reed said yesterday that your system is almost clear of active ingredients." "Almost," Harry emphasized. "Not completely. Do you want to wait?" McGonagall asked, her tone making it clear she would support whatever decision he made. Harry considered it briefly before shaking his head. "No. We've both had enough uncertainty. Better to start figuring out where we stand." As he followed McGonagall through the corridors, Harry tried to prepare himself for the meeting. What would he say to Ginny? What could he say that would make any of this less painful for either of them? "Remember, Potter," McGonagall said as they reached her office door, "there is no correct outcome to this conversation except honesty. Whatever you're genuinely feeling, or not feeling, is valid." With that parting advice, she left him to enter alone. Ginny stood by the window, her back to the door, copper hair catching the morning sunlight. She turned at the sound of his entrance, and Harry was struck by how composed she appeared, tired, certainly, with shadows beneath her eyes that matched his own, but steady. Determined. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi," Harry replied, remaining near the door, uncertain how close she wanted him to be. Fawkes, who had been riding on his shoulder, flew across the room and landed on the back of a chair positioned precisely between them, neutral ground. "He's still with you," Ginny observed. "Yeah. Hasn't left since, well, since." An awkward silence fell, heavy with all the things that needed to be said but neither knew how to begin. "How are you feeling?" Ginny finally asked. "Physically, I mean. From the withdrawal." "Better," Harry said. "The worst passed a couple days ago. Malfoy gave me a neutralizing agent that helped." "Malfoy?" Ginny's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Apparently even he has standards," Harry replied with a ghost of a smile. "Love potions cross a line even for Slytherins." Ginny nodded, twisting a strand of hair around her finger, a nervous habit Harry had noticed before. Was that observation his own, or had it been influenced by the potions too? The constant second-guessing was exhausting. "I got your letter," Harry said, breaking another stretch of silence. "I meant what I wrote," Ginny replied. "Every word." "I know." Harry took a tentative step further into the room. "I'm glad you don't blame me for any of this." "How could I?" Ginny asked. "You're as much a victim as I am. More so, really. At least my feelings were my own, however embarrassing they might have been." "That's the hardest part," Harry admitted. "Not knowing what was real and what wasn't. If any of what I felt for you was genuine or just chemicals." Ginny nodded, her expression pained but understanding. "And now? What are you feeling now?" It was the question Harry had been dreading, yet he owed her complete honesty. "Confusion," he said after a moment's consideration. "When I look at you, there's still something. But it's quieter now. Less overwhelming. I don't know if that's because the potions are fading or because everything that's happened has just complicated things." "I understand," Ginny said softly. "For what it's worth, I'm confused too. Not about my feelings, those have always been real, if not always healthy. But about what any of this means for us moving forward. Is there an us moving forward?" Harry asked, the question emerging before he could consider its bluntness. Ginny didn't flinch. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "I don't think either of us can make that decision yet. Not until you're completely free of the potion's influence. Not until we've both had time to process everything that's happened." "That makes sense," Harry agreed, relieved by her pragmatism. "But," Ginny continued, taking a step toward him, "I'd like to try something, if you're willing. Something that might help us both get some clarity." "What?" "A reset," Ginny explained. "We pretend we're meeting for the first time, without all the history, without the potions, without my childhood crush or my mother's interference. Just, two people getting to know each other properly, on our own terms." Harry considered the proposal. "You mean, start over completely? As strangers?" "Not strangers exactly," Ginny clarified. "We know too much about each other for that. But as friends without expectations. No pressure for romance, no assumptions about where it might lead. Just, authentic interaction." It was such a sensible suggestion that Harry found himself nodding. "I'd like that," he said, realizing he meant it. Whatever else had been manufactured, he genuinely enjoyed Ginny's company when she was being her authentic self, not the shy, starstruck girl of his early Hogwarts years or the suddenly attractive vision the potions had enhanced, but the clever, fierce young woman who stood before him now. "Good," Ginny said, offering her hand formally. "Hello. I'm Ginny Weasley. Quidditch enthusiast, hexing expert, and survivor of both possession and familial betrayal. Nice to meet you." Despite everything, Harry found himself smiling as he took her offered hand. Harry Potter. The boy who lived to be manipulated, apparently. Quidditch captain, trouble magnet, and recent Phoenix acquisition. Fawkes trilled approvingly from his perch, the sound lightening the atmosphere further. See? Ginny said, releasing his hand. That wasn't so hard. For the first time since the revelation, Harry felt something like hope for their future, not necessarily as a couple, but at least as two people who could move past this trauma without permanent damage to their relationship, whatever form it might ultimately take. There's something else you should know, Ginny said, her expression growing serious again. About my mother. Harry tensed. What about her? She's pleading guilty to all charges, Ginny revealed. No trial, no defense. She's accepting whatever punishment the Wisengamot imposes. That's unexpected, Harry said, genuinely surprised. From what he knew of Molly Weasley, he had anticipated a fierce defense of her actions as being for his own good. She wrote me a letter, Ginny continued. Said that seeing what her actions had done to our family, to you, to me, it made her realize she'd become something she never intended. She doesn't want to put any of us through a trial. And Dumbledore? Harry asked. Fighting every charge, Ginny replied, a flash of anger crossing her features. His legal team is arguing that as your magical guardian, he had the authority to make decisions regarding your well-being, including guiding your social development. Harry's own anger flared. Guiding my social development? Is that what he's calling it? It's not going well for him, Ginny assured him. The evidence is overwhelming, and public opinion has turned completely against him. Even the Prophet, which usually treats him like Merlin reincarnated, is calling for the maximum penalties. They talked for nearly an hour, sharing what they had each learned during their days apart. Ginny described her time at Shell Cottage, the comfort of Bill and Fleur's unwavering support, the healing properties of the seaside air. Harry told her about the discoveries regarding Dumbledore's other protocols, the prophecy manipulation, the unexpected allies who had emerged from unexpected places. Throughout, Fawkes remained on his neutral perch, occasionally trilling soft notes that seemed to ease the conversation when tensions or emotions threatened to rise too high. I should go, Ginny said eventually. I promised Luna I'd meet her after getting settled back in. She's been owing me daily affirmations to ward off emotional rackspurts. Luna's been great, Harry said sincerely. In her own unique way. Ginny smiled fondly. That's Luna. Always sees things others miss. She hesitated at the door. This was good, Harry. A good first step. Yeah, he agreed. It was. Friends? She asked, a hint of vulnerability breaking through her composed exterior. Friends, Harry confirmed, surprised by how right it felt. Definitely friends. After Ginny left, Harry remained in McGonagall's office, processing the conversation. Fawkes flew to his shoulder, rubbing his feathered head against Harry's cheek. That went better than I expected, Harry told the Phoenix. Way better. McGonagall returned a few minutes later, her observant eyes taking in Harry's relatively relaxed posture. A productive conversation, I take it. We're starting over, Harry explained. As friends. No expectations, no pressure. Just, seeing where things go naturally. A wise approach, McGonagall approved. Time and distance often provide the clarity that proximity obscures. Harry nodded, then asked the question that had been lurking at the back of his mind throughout his talk with Ginny. Professor, what happens with Dumbledore now? Legally, I mean. McGonagall's expression tightened. The preliminary hearings begin Monday. Given the evidence and the number of charges, a full trial is inevitable. You will likely be called to testify, though arrangements can be made for you to do so via pensive memories if you prefer. And if he's convicted? For the charges related specifically to the unauthorized administration of mind-altering potions to a minor? McGonagall's voice was grim. The minimum sentence is 10 years in Azkaban. Given the scale, duration, and his position of trust, prosecutors are seeking 30. 30 years. The man Harry had once respected above all others, who had guided and mentored him, who had also manipulated and betrayed him in the most fundamental way possible, facing 3 decades in the wizarding prison. The thought should have brought satisfaction, but Harry felt only a hollow sadness. He really believed he was doing the right thing, Harry said quietly. That's the worst part. He'll go to his grave believing the end justified the means. The most dangerous type of wrongdoing is that done with absolute conviction of righteousness, McGonagall agreed. Albus never doubted the wisdom of his grand design, not even when it required sacrificing the autonomy of those under his care. Harry remained silent, contemplating this harsh truth. All of Dumbledore's machinations, the potions, the prophecy editing, the protocols for other students, stemmed from an unwavering belief in his own judgment, his own vision for the greater good. There is one more matter we should discuss, McGonagall said, interrupting his thoughts. The prophecy. Harry's attention sharpened. Has the Department of Mysteries found the original? Yes, McGonagall confirmed. They've provided a certified transcript to the DMLE as evidence in Dumbledore's case. As the subject of the prophecy, you have the right to hear it in its complete, unedited form. Harry's heart raced. Whenever you feel ready, McGonagall replied. An unspeakable can bring the original recording to Hogwarts, or arrangements can be made for you to visit the department. I want to hear it, Harry said immediately. As soon as possible. I'll make the arrangements, McGonagall promised. Though I caution you to prepare yourself. According to the unspeakables, what Dumbledore withheld may be significant. Harry wasn't surprised. Of course Dumbledore had kept critical information from him. It was becoming a pattern so predictable it would almost be disappointing if the prophecy turned out to be complete as he had shared it. One last thing, McGonagall said, her tone softening. The Board of Governors has made a decision regarding Hogwarts leadership. I've been asked to continue as headmistress, not merely in an acting capacity, for the remainder of the school year. After that, the position will be formally opened for applications. Congratulations, Harry said, genuinely pleased for his head of house. That's brilliant. Thank you, Potter, McGonagall replied, a rare smile briefly crossing her features. I admit, I never anticipated assuming the role under such circumstances. But perhaps Hogwarts could benefit from a different approach to leadership. One with fewer secrets and more transparency. Definitely, Harry agreed fervently. As he left McGonagall's office, Fawkes riding comfortably on his shoulder, Harry felt lighter than he had in days. The conversation with Ginny had gone well. McGonagall was bringing a new, more honest leadership to Hogwarts. The complete prophecy would soon be revealed. Even the withdrawal symptoms were finally abating, leaving his mind clearer with each passing hour. None of the fundamental problems had been solved, Dumbledore's trial loomed, the full extent of the manipulations was still being uncovered, and Voldemort remained a deadly threat. But for the first time since Fawkes's revelatory burning day, Harry felt like he was reclaiming control of his own story. The phoenix on his shoulder trilled softly, as if in agreement with his unspoken thoughts. Whatever came next, Harry would face it with clear eyes and an unmanipulated heart. The bitter truths had been exposed, painful as they were. Now came the harder part, building something authentic from the ashes of what had been revealed as false. It would not be easy. But as Harry had learned repeatedly throughout his life, the path of truth rarely was. Chapter 3, Reclaimed Future's morning light filtered through the high windows of the Department of Mysteries, casting long shadows across the stone floor. Harry stood in a circular chamber he'd never seen before, smaller than the amphitheater where he'd witnessed Sirius's death, more intimate, its walls lined with shelves holding what appeared to be thousands of small crystal orbs similar to the one containing his prophecy. The prophecy archive, explained the unspeakable who had guided him here. She was a tall, severe-looking witch with silver streaks in her dark hair and eyes that seemed to see beyond physical reality. She had introduced herself only as Amarantha, offering no surname. Unlike the Hall of Prophecy, which contains active predictions, this chamber preserves complete recordings of all prophecies ever made, whether fulfilled, broken, or still in progress. Harry nodded, his throat dry with anticipation. Beside him stood Professor McGonagall, her presence a steady comfort. Fawkes perched on his shoulder as always, unusually subdued in this strange environment. "Are you certain you wish to proceed, Mr. Potter?" Amarantha asked, her voice neutral. "Once heard, prophecies cannot be unheard. Knowledge changes destiny as surely as ignorance shapes it." "I'm sure," Harry replied firmly. "I need to know what Dumbledore kept from me." The unspeakable studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Very well." She moved to a specific shelf, her fingers dancing over crystal orbs that looked identical to Harry's untrained eye. Finally, she selected one that glowed with a faint blue luminescence. "The original recording," she explained, "made on the night Sybil Trelawney first spoke these words to Albus Dumbledore. Unlike the copy in the Hall of Prophecy, this contains the prophecy in its entirety, unedited and uncensored." She placed the orb on a small pedestal in the center of the room. "When you are ready, simply touch the crystal. Only you may activate it, as the prophecy's primary subject." Harry glanced at McGonagall, who gave him an encouraging nod. With a deep breath, he reached out and placed his palm against the cool surface of the orb. Immediately, a figure rose from the crystal, Trelawney as he had never seen her, her eyes rolling back, her voice harsh and deep, just as Dumbledore had described. But instead of beginning with the familiar words Harry had memorized, she spoke something entirely new, the one with the choice to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Harry stiffened. Choice. Not power. Dumbledore had changed the very first line. "Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not." So far, this matched what Dumbledore had told him, but Trelawney continued speaking, her voice growing even more ominous, "And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. But beware the guardian who sees the child as weapon rather than ward, for in shadows of protection lie seeds of destruction." Harry's breath caught in his throat. This was new. Completely new. The path of sacrifice is one of many, not the only way. Love freely given is stronger than love constrained. The marked one's greatest power lies not in his death but in his choices. The one with the choice to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born as the seventh month dies. The spectral Trelawney sank back into the crystal, leaving the chamber in profound silence. Harry stood frozen, his mind racing to process the implications of what he had just heard. "He lied," he finally whispered. Dumbledore didn't just omit parts, he actively changed the beginning to make it sound like there was only one possible outcome. McGonagall's face was ashen. "The path of sacrifice is one of many, not the only way," she quoted softly. "Albus led you to believe your death might be necessary to defeat Voldemort. And, beware the guardian who sees the child as weapon rather than ward," Harry continued, anger building in his chest. "That's him. Dumbledore. The prophecy literally warned about him. Love freely given is stronger than love constrained," McGonagall added, her voice hardening with each word. Even the prophecy itself condemned his use of love potions. Harry laughed, a bitter sound devoid of humor. And he ignored it completely. Twisted the prophecy to fit his plans instead of adapting his plans to fit the truth. Amarantha, who had remained silent during the revelation, finally spoke. "Prophecies are dangerous tools, Mr. Potter. They show possible paths, not certain destinies. Those who attempt to force prophetic outcomes often create the very disasters they seek to prevent." Like Voldemort, Harry realized. He heard part of the prophecy and tried to kill me, which ended up marking me as his equal, exactly as the prophecy said. And like Dumbledore, McGonagall said grimly. By treating you as a weapon to be directed rather than a person to be protected, he may have undermined the very victory he sought to ensure. Harry turned back to the prophecy orb, its blue glow now seeming somehow accusatory. "Can I hear it again?" Amarantha nodded, and Harry once more placed his hand on the crystal. This time, he listened with focused attention, committing every word to memory, noting each difference between what Dumbledore had told him and what Trelawney had actually prophesied. When the spectral figure had once again retreated into the orb, Harry took a deep breath. "I need to think about what this means," he said quietly. "All these years, I thought I understood my destiny, but—" "You have more agency than Dumbledore led you to believe," McGonagall finished for him. "More choices. More paths. The Marked One's greatest power lies not in his death but in his choices," Harry repeated. "That changes everything." As they left the Department of Mysteries, Harry's mind churned with possibilities. The prophecy hadn't specified that he had to die to defeat Voldemort. It hadn't even specified that he had to fight Voldemort personally. It had spoken of choice, of multiple paths, of love freely given. "Professor," he said as they waited for the lift, "do you think Dumbledore was planning for me to die? Is that why he never properly trained me to fight Voldemort?" McGonagall's expression was troubled. "I cannot speak to Albus's deepest intentions, Potter. But I have observed his interactions with you over the years. He has consistently provided you just enough information to move in the direction he desired, but never enough to make truly informed choices." Like with the Philosopher's Stone, Harry realized. And the Chamber of Secrets. And Sirius. Each memory brought fresh pain as he recognized the pattern of manipulation that had defined his relationship with Dumbledore from the very beginning. "I believe," McGonagall said carefully, "that Albus convinced himself he was protecting you by controlling information. Perhaps he feared that knowing everything would burden you unnecessarily. Or perhaps," she stopped herself. "Perhaps he feared I would choose a different path than the one he had planned," Harry finished. "One that didn't fit his grand design." McGonagall didn't confirm his suspicion aloud, but her silence was answer enough. By the time they returned to Hogwarts, it was late afternoon. Harry felt mentally exhausted but also strangely energized, as though long-closed doors in his mind had suddenly been flung open, revealing new possibilities he had never considered. Hermione, Ron, and Neville were waiting anxiously in the Room of Requirement, which had become their unofficial sanctuary since the revelation. Luna sat cross-legged on a cushion in the corner, seemingly focused on weaving some kind of charm from colorful threads, though Harry suspected she was listening intently. "Well?" Hermione prompted the moment Harry entered. "What did it say?" Harry took a deep breath and recounted the complete prophecy, word for word. Hermione gasped audibly at the revelations, while Ron's face darkened with anger. Neville listened with solemn attention, and Luna's fingers never stopped weaving, though her eyes grew wider with each new detail. When he finished, silence filled the room, heavy with implications. "He lied to you," Ron finally said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "He bloody well lied about the most important thing in your life." "Not just lied," Hermione added, her analytical mind already dissecting the prophecy's nuances. "He manipulated the very foundation of how you understood your role in this war. The one with the choice versus the one with the power, that's a fundamental difference in agency. And the path of sacrifice is one of many," Neville observed quietly. "He led you to believe sacrifice was the only option." "The Nargles have been warning about this for years," Luna commented serenely. "They cluster around people who aren't what they seem. Dumbledore always had the most." Despite the gravity of the situation, Harry felt a small smile tug at his lips. Luna's perspective, however unconventional, was oddly comforting in its consistency. "So what now?" Ron asked the question they were all thinking. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" "It changes how I approach defeating Voldemort," Harry confirmed. "But first, there's something else I need to do." He met each of their eyes in turn. "I need to face Dumbledore." At the trial, Hermione realized. "It starts tomorrow." Harry nodded. "I've decided to testify in person. Not just submit memories. I want to look him in the eye when I confront him about everything, the potions, the prophecy, all of it." "Are you sure that's wise?" Hermione asked gently. "It will be emotionally draining, and the prophet will sensationalize every moment. I'm sure, Harry said firmly. I've spent years being manipulated from the shadows. It's time to step into the light and reclaim my own story. His friends exchanged glances, communicating silently in that way close companions often do. Then we'll be there with you, Ron declared. All of us. Actually, came a voice from the doorway, make that all of us plus one. Harry turned to find Ginny standing there, her expression resolute. I just heard from Dad. Mum's formal sentencing is scheduled for right after Dumbledore's preliminary hearing. I'm going to be there. She met Harry's eyes steadily. We both deserve to see justice done. Since their conversation in McGonagall's office a week ago, Harry and Ginny had been cautiously rebuilding their relationship as friends. They'd spoken several times, always in public settings, always with an awareness of the complex history between them. This would be the first truly difficult experience they would face together since the revelation. Are you sure? Harry asked. It won't be easy to watch. Nothing about this has been easy, Ginny replied with a sad smile. But I need closure. We both do. Harry nodded, understanding completely. Then we'll face it together. As friends. The word friends no longer carried the bitter sting it might have just weeks ago. It had become something precious in its authenticity, a relationship built on mutual respect and shared experience rather than manufactured affection. Speaking of facing things together, Hermione said, changing the subject, we need to discuss what the complete prophecy means for our strategy against Voldemort. Strategy? Ron repeated. Since when do we have a strategy beyond, keep Harry alive and hope for the best? That's exactly the point, Hermione said earnestly. We've been reactive, not proactive. But now we know Harry has choices, multiple paths, not just sacrifice. The prophecy mentioned power the Dark Lord knows not, Neville pointed out. Dumbledore told Harry that was love, but what if it's something else? Or something more specific than just love, in the abstract, Hermione suggested. Love freely given, the prophecy said. That's a particular kind of magic. Blood protection, Harry realized. Like what my mother gave me. Dumbledore always said her sacrifice protected me because she chose to die for me out of love. But the prophecy suggests that's just one manifestation of the power, Hermione continued excitedly. Not the only one. Luna looked up from her weaving. There are 7 forms of magical love in ancient traditions, she said matter-of-factly. Sacrificial is just one. There's also creative love, healing love, protective love, truth-revealing love, transformative love, and unifying love. Everyone stared at her for a moment. That's actually extremely helpful, Luna, Hermione admitted, looking slightly chagrined at her surprise. I've read something similar in Magical Bonds Through the Ages, though it used different terminology. So what, I need to figure out how to use these other types of love against Voldemort? Harry asked, struggling to imagine how that would work practically. I can't exactly hug him to death. Maybe not literally, Ginny said thoughtfully. But remember what happened when he possessed you at the Ministry? Your thoughts of the people you love drove him out because he couldn't bear to share your mind when it was filled with an emotion he doesn't understand. Harry remembered the excruciating pain of Voldemort's possession, followed by the sudden relief when thoughts of Sirius and his friends had flooded his mind. That's true, he acknowledged. But it was defensive, not offensive. It protected me, but it didn't hurt him. Perhaps that's not the right approach, Luna suggested dreamily. The prophecy says vanquish, not destroy or kill. To vanquish can mean to overcome, to subdue, to defeat conclusively. Like removing the darkness from him, rather than removing him from existence, Neville mused. That's poetic, but Voldemort's not exactly redeemable, Ron objected. He's murdered dozens of people, including Harry's parents. And yet the prophecy suggests multiple paths, Hermione countered. Maybe we've been too limited in our thinking because Dumbledore only presented one possibility. Or maybe the path isn't about how Voldemort ends, but about how Harry approaches the confrontation, Ginny suggested. Fighting out of freely given love for those he wants to protect, rather than out of manipulation or obligation. Harry considered this perspective. All his life, he'd viewed his eventual confrontation with Voldemort as an inescapable destiny, a burden he carried because there was no alternative. But what if he approached it differently, as a choice made freely, out of love for the people and world he wanted to protect? We need more information, he decided. About these different forms of love magic, about Voldemort's weaknesses, about everything Dumbledore might have been hiding. I can research the love magic aspects, Hermione offered immediately. I'll contact the surviving Order members, Ron volunteered. Dad, Bill, Lupin, they might know things Dumbledore kept from us. Luna and I can look into alternative protective magics, Neville suggested. Gran has access to some pretty obscure family grimoires. And I'll write to Charlie about magical creatures that might be resistant to Voldemort's kind of power, Ginny added. Dragons have ancient magics we barely understand. Harry felt a surge of gratitude for his friends, these people who stood by him not because of manipulation or obligation, but out of genuine care and loyalty. Thank you, he said simply. All of you. What are friends for, if not helping you find creative ways to defeat Dark Lords? Ron quipped, breaking the serious mood. As evening approached, they dispersed to prepare for the trial the following day. Harry found himself walking beside Ginny as they left the room of requirement, a comfortable silence between them. Are you really okay with seeing your mum tomorrow? He asked softly. Watching her be sentenced. Ginny was quiet for a moment before answering. No, she admitted. I'm not okay with any of this. But I need to see it through. For years, she told me what to wear, how to behave, who to be, always with the underlying message that it would make me more appealing to you. Her voice caught slightly. I need to see her face the consequences of trying to control both our lives. I understand, Harry said, and he truly did. The need for closure, for justice, was powerful. Besides, Ginny added with a hint of her old humor, the look on Dumbledore's face when he sees you and me sitting together, completely potion-free and still talking to each other. That alone will be worth the price of admission. Harry laughed, surprised by how good it felt. That's true. We're not following his script anymore. We never will again, Ginny said firmly. Neither of us. They parted ways in the common room, each heading to their respective dormitories to rest before the emotionally challenging day ahead. As Harry prepared for bed, Fawkes watching serenely from his now permanent perch, he found himself reflecting on how much had changed in the weeks since the Phoenix's revelatory burning day. The withdrawal symptoms had finally subsided completely. Healer Reed had declared Harry's system clear of all potion residue at their last session. His mind felt sharper, clearer than it had in years. More importantly, his emotions felt authentically his own. When he thought of Ginny now, he felt a complex mixture of warmth, respect, and tentative friendship, none of the overwhelming, consuming infatuation the potions had induced. It was too early to know if genuine romantic feelings might eventually develop between them, but for the first time, any such development would be real, not manufactured. Sleep came easier than expected that night, despite the trial looming the next day. Perhaps, Harry thought as consciousness faded, it was because he was finally approaching life on his own terms, not as the pawn Dumbledore had tried to shape, but as the person he was choosing to become. The Ministry of Magic's largest courtroom was filled to capacity the next morning. The Wizengamot members in their plum-colored robes occupied the highest tier of seating, their faces solemn. Below them, rows of benches were packed with journalists, ministry officials, and select members of the public who had secured the coveted tickets to witness what the prophet was already calling, the trial of the century. Harry sat in the front row of the witness section, flanked by Ron and Hermione. Ginny, Neville, and Luna occupied the seats directly behind them. Arthur Weasley sat nearby, his face drawn and tired but his back straight with dignity. Professor McGonagall had also come, along with several other Hogwarts staff members whose expressions ranged from stunned disbelief to barely concealed anger. Fawkes, who had initially caused a stir among the security wizards, now perched regally on the back of Harry's chair, his presence a silent testament that only increased the dramatic atmosphere of the proceedings. A hush fell over the courtroom as the side door opened and Albus Dumbledore was led in by a pair of Aurors. He wore plain grey robes rather than his usual flamboyant attire, and his hands were bound by magical restraints that glowed faintly blue, specific wards designed to contain a wizard of his power. Despite these indignities, he carried himself with the same serene dignity Harry had always associated with him, his blue eyes clear behind his half-moon spectacles. Their gazes met across the courtroom, and Harry felt a complex surge of emotions, anger, betrayal, grief, and something harder to define. Perhaps mourning for the mentor he had thought he knew, the relationship he had believed was built on trust. Dumbledore's expression softened slightly at the sight of Harry, a sad smile touching his lips. Then his eyes moved to Fawkes, and for the first time, his composure faltered. Something like genuine pain crossed his features as he regarded his former familiar now firmly allied with Harry. The chief warlock, Madame Marchbanks, elevated to the position following Dumbledore's arrest, called the court to order. Preliminary hearing in the case of Wizarding Britain vs. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, she announced, her magically amplified voice echoing through the chamber. The charges are as follows: 890 counts of administering controlled substances to a minor without consent, 890 counts of attempted magical coercion, violation of guardianship trust, conspiracy to interfere with magical consent, unauthorized use of school resources for personal agenda, and tampering with prophetic records. The list continued, each charge landing like a physical blow. By the time Marchbanks finished reading, the courtroom was deadly silent, the enormity of Dumbledore's alleged crimes hanging heavy in the air. "How does the defendant plead?" Marchbanks asked. Dumbledore rose slowly to his feet. "To the factual elements of the charges, I cannot plead not guilty," he said, his voice as calm and measured as ever. "The evidence is substantial and accurate. However, I contest the characterization of my actions as criminal in nature. I acted as magical guardian to Mr. Potter, with full legal authority to make decisions regarding his welfare and future." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Harry felt his hands clench into fists, his knuckles white with tension. "You claim authority to administer love potions to your ward without his knowledge or consent?" Marchbanks asked, her tone making it clear how she viewed this defense. "I claim authority to guide Mr. Potter's social development using all tools at my disposal," Dumbledore corrected gently. "The potions in question were mild, carefully calibrated to enhance natural compatibility rather than create artificial infatuation. My intentions were benevolent, designed to secure Harry's happiness and stability during a period of great turmoil." "Your intentions are not on trial, Mr. Dumbledore," Marchbanks replied sharply. "Your actions are. And those actions constituted a fundamental violation of magical consent laws." The preliminary hearing proceeded with the presentation of evidence. Ministry officials displayed the recovered vials, projected images of the ledger documenting years of systematic potioning, and presented testimony from potion experts regarding the nature and effects of the modified amortentia. When it was Harry's turn to testify, he walked to the witness stand with his head high, Fawkes flying ahead to perch on the railing beside him. The courtroom fell silent as he was sworn in, hundreds of eyes watching intently. "Mr. Potter," began the prosecutor, a stern witch with close-cropped silver hair, "please describe in your own words when and how you became aware of Mr. Dumbledore's actions regarding the love potions." Harry recounted the events of that day, Fawkes's unusual burning, the discovery of the hidden cabinet, the revelation of the vials and ledger. He described the subsequent medical examinations, the withdrawal symptoms, the gradual process of distinguishing between manufactured and authentic emotions. Throughout his testimony, he kept his eyes fixed on Dumbledore, who listened with an expression of sad resignation, occasionally nodding slightly as though confirming details. "And how has this affected you, Mr. Potter?" the prosecutor asked. Harry took a deep breath. "It destroyed my trust," he said simply. Not just in Professor Dumbledore, but in my own feelings, my own mind. For weeks, I've questioned every emotion, every attraction, wondering what was real and what was manufactured. It's like having the foundation of your identity pulled out from under you. And your relationship with Miss Weasley? Harry glanced briefly at Ginny, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. It's been reconstructed, he said carefully. We're building a friendship based on honesty and mutual respect, without the artificial influence of the potions. Whether that develops into something more in the future will be our choice, not one made for us by others. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied. One final question, Mr. Potter. Professor Dumbledore has claimed he acted as your magical guardian, with authority to make decisions for your welfare. Were you ever informed that he held this legal position in your life? No, Harry replied, the single word heavy with implication. I was never told he was my guardian. I was never consulted about any decisions regarding my life or future. I was never given choices, only directions. The prosecutor turned to the Wizengamot. No further questions. Dumbledore's defender, a dignified wizard with an impressive white beard that rivaled the former headmaster's own, approached next. Mr. Potter, he began in a sympathetic tone, no one doubts the distress this situation has caused you. However, I must ask, prior to the discovery of the potions, were you unhappy with your developing feelings for Miss Weasley? Harry considered the question carefully. No, he admitted. But that's the insidious nature of such potions, isn't it? They made me think I was happy with something I never actually chose. The defender nodded as though this confirmed something. And in your many years at Hogwarts, did Professor Dumbledore ever take actions that placed you in direct danger or caused you deliberate harm? Harry almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. He sent me back to abusive relatives every summer despite my objections. He kept critical information about Voldemort and the prophecy from me until after my godfather died because of that ignorance. He allowed me to face life-threatening situations year after year without adequate preparation or protection. His voice rose slightly. And now I've learned he edited the prophecy that shaped my entire life, removing sections that would have given me more agency in my own destiny. Murmurs erupted throughout the courtroom. This revelation about the prophecy tampering had not been publicly disclosed before Harry's testimony. The defender looked momentarily wrong-footed but recovered quickly. The prophecy alterations are a separate matter from the current charges, are they? Harry interrupted. They show a pattern of controlling information, manipulating outcomes, all while claiming it was for my own good or the greater good. The love potions weren't an isolated incident, they were part of a years-long strategy to direct my life according to Professor Dumbledore's plan rather than my own choices. Fawkes trilled softly beside him, a sound that somehow conveyed approval. The defender glanced uneasily at the Phoenix before continuing. Mr. Potter, do you believe Professor Dumbledore intended to harm you through his actions? Harry looked directly at Dumbledore before answering. No, he said honestly. I believe he convinced himself he was acting in my best interest. But good intentions don't justify violating someone's mind and heart. They don't excuse taking away someone's most basic right, the right to choose their own path. When the cross-examination concluded, Harry returned to his seat. Hermione squeezed his hand in silent support, and Ron clapped him briefly on the shoulder. Behind him, he heard Ginny release a shaky breath. The hearing continued with testimony from Healer Reed about the physical and psychological effects of long-term love potion exposure, from Professor McGonagall about her discovery of additional protocols in Dumbledore's private records, and from an unspeakable who confirmed the tampering with the prophecy record. Throughout, Dumbledore maintained his composure, occasionally conferring quietly with his defender but mostly listening with an expression of sad acceptance, as though he had anticipated this outcome from the beginning. Finally, Madame Marchbanks called for Dumbledore himself to address the court. He rose slowly, his bound hands before him, and surveyed the crowded chamber with those piercing blue eyes that had once seemed so wise and trustworthy to Harry. I stand before you, he began, his voice soft yet carrying to every corner of the room, not to deny my actions, but to explain them. Not to escape consequences, but to place them in context. He paused, his gaze finding Harry. I have dedicated my life to the greater good, to the defeat of dark forces that would destroy our world. In pursuit of that mission, I have made difficult choices, painful sacrifices, and yes, moral compromises that will forever weigh upon my conscience. Another pause, longer this time. Harry Potter is not merely a student or a ward to me. He is the child of prophecy, the one destined to face Lord Voldemort when even I could not defeat him. The weight of that destiny, the future of our world, rests upon his young shoulders. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom at the casual mention of Voldemort's name. Everything I have done, Dumbledore continued, every decision I have made regarding Harry, has been in service to preparing him for that inevitable confrontation. Including, yes, the potions that have brought us to this courtroom today. He sighed deeply, suddenly looking every one of his considerable years. I recognized in Harry a capacity for love that might be his greatest weapon against Voldemort. I sought to nurture that capacity, to give him connections that would anchor him to life when sacrifice might be necessary. The Weasley family represented stability, loyalty, light, everything Voldemort despises and fears. Miss Weasley, in particular, shared a unique connection with Harry through their mutual experience with Tom Riddle. Their compatibility was evident to any observer. The potions merely accelerated a natural process that circumstances and timing might otherwise have prevented from flowering. Harry felt a surge of renewed anger at this characterization. To hear Dumbledore speak, one would think he'd merely played matchmaker rather than systematically manipulated Harry's most intimate feelings for years. I do not expect forgiveness, Dumbledore concluded, his voice heavy with what sounded like genuine regret. I do not even seek understanding. I merely offer context for actions that, viewed in isolation, appear unconscionable. When viewed through the lens of war against an implacable enemy, perhaps they become comprehensible, if not justifiable. He lowered himself back to his seat, the magical restraints glowing briefly brighter as he moved. Madame Marchbanks allowed a moment of silence before speaking. Having heard the evidence and testimony presented today, the Wisengamot will now deliberate on whether to proceed with a full trial. Given the serious nature of the charges and the defendant's own admission to the factual elements, I believe our course is clear. She turned to the assembled Wisengamot members. Those in favor of proceeding to full trial? Nearly every hand rose immediately. Only 3 or 4 members hesitated, perhaps out of long-standing loyalty to Dumbledore, before reluctantly raising their hands as well. The vote is unanimous, Marchbanks declared. Albus Dumbledore will stand trial for all charges presented today. The proceedings will commence 2 weeks from today, allowing both prosecution and defense adequate time to prepare. The defendant will remain in ministry custody until that time. As Dumbledore was led from the courtroom, he turned his head slightly to look once more at Harry. Their eyes met across the distance, and Harry felt a strange mixture of pity and resolve. The old wizard gave him a small, sad nod, acknowledgement, perhaps, that the student had finally moved beyond the master's control. There was a brief recess before Molly Weasley's sentencing. Harry considered leaving. He had no desire to witness her punishment, regardless of how justified it might be. But Ginny caught his arm as he started to rise. "Stay," she said softly. "Please. I could use the support." So he remained seated as Molly was brought in, looking nothing like the formidable matriarch he remembered. Her normally vibrant red hair hung limp and dull, her face gaunt with strain and grief. Unlike Dumbledore, she kept her eyes downcast, not meeting anyone's gaze, not even when she passed directly by her husband and daughter. The chief warlock summarized the charges to which Molly had already pleaded guilty: complicity in administering controlled substances to a minor, conspiracy to interfere with magical consent, and breach of guest protection, a serious charge in wizarding culture, relating to her violation of Harry's trust while under her roof. When asked if she wished to address the court before sentencing, Molly finally raised her head. Her eyes, red-rimmed from crying, found first Ginny, then Harry. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. I convinced myself I was acting out of love, giving two children I cared for deeply the happiness I thought they deserved. I didn't see it as manipulation but as helping destiny along. She swallowed hard. I was wrong. Terribly, unforgivably wrong. No mother should ever attempt to control her child's heart, nor interfere with another's free will in matters of love. I accept whatever punishment the court deems appropriate. Beside Harry, Ginny was trembling slightly. He hesitated, then gently touched her hand. She gripped his fingers tightly, drawing strength for what was to come. Madame Marchbanks announced the sentence, 3 years in Azkaban, reduced from the standard 5 due to her guilty plea and cooperation, followed by 5 years of restricted magic use and mandatory counseling. Additionally, she would be forbidden from using or possessing any mind-altering potions for the remainder of her life, with regular monitoring to ensure compliance. As the sentence was read, Ginny's grip on Harry's hand tightened painfully, but she made no sound. Arthur Weasley, seated nearby, closed his eyes briefly, his expression one of profound sadness rather than shock. The punishment had likely been negotiated in advance, part of Molly's agreement to plead guilty. When the Aurors approached to escort Molly from the courtroom, she looked once more toward her family. "Ginny," she said softly. "Arthur." Not now, Mum," Ginny interrupted, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Maybe someday, but not now." Molly nodded in sad understanding and allowed herself to be led away without further protest. The courtroom began to empty, journalists rushing out to file their stories, spectators discussing the proceedings in hushed, excited tones. Harry remained seated, still holding Ginny's hand, giving her the time she needed to compose herself. "That's it, then," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "It's really over." "The legal part is," Harry agreed gently. "The rest takes more time." She nodded, finally releasing his hand. "Thank you for staying." "That's what friends do," he replied simply. They made their way out of the courtroom as a group, Harry, Ginny, Ron, Hermione, Neville, and Luna, with Arthur following a few steps behind, giving his daughter space while remaining supportive. Fawkes flew ahead, leading them through the less crowded corridors of the ministry to avoid the press gathered in the main atrium. Outside, in the crisp spring air, Arthur finally spoke. "I've arranged for a portkey to take us to the Three Broomsticks," he said. "Unless you'd prefer to return directly to Hogwarts." Harry looked at his friends, reading the consensus in their expressions. "The Three Broomsticks would be good," he replied. "I think we could all use a moment to decompress before facing the school." The portkey deposited them in a private room Madame Rosmerta had prepared, complete with butterbeer, sandwiches, and blissful privacy from the curious public. For a while, they ate and drank in companionable silence, each processing the events of the day in their own way. "Do you think 3 years is enough?" Ron finally asked, breaking the quiet. "For what Mum did?" Arthur sighed heavily. "The standard sentence would have been 5, minimum," he said. "Her cooperation and genuine remorse reduced it. And..." He hesitated, "there were mitigating factors the public doesn't know about." "What factors?" Ginny asked sharply. Arthur looked pained. "The investigation found evidence that Dumbledore may have used subtle compulsion charms on Molly over the years. Not enough to remove her responsibility, she made her choices, but enough to encourage certain tendencies. To amplify her maternal instincts toward controlling outcomes for her children." Harry felt a chill run down his spine. How far had Dumbledore's manipulations extended? How many lives had he shaped from the shadows? "That doesn't excuse what she did," Ginny said flatly. "No," Arthur agreed. "It doesn't. But it helps me understand how the woman I married for her fierce independence became someone who would violate another person's autonomy so completely." The conversation shifted to Dumbledore's upcoming trial, the revelations about the prophecy, and what it all meant for their fight against Voldemort. "The problem remains," Hermione pointed out pragmatically, that while we now know the prophecy gives Harry more options, we don't yet know what those options actually are. "The path of sacrifice is one of many," Harry quoted. "But what are the others? How do I access this power the Dark Lord knows not, without following Dumbledore's script?" "I think," Luna said dreamily, looking up from the butterbeer cork she'd been transforming into what appeared to be a miniature phoenix, "that's the wrong question." Everyone turned to her, used by now to her occasional insights hidden within apparent non-sequiturs. "The right question," she continued, "is not what power you use, but how you choose to use it. The prophecy doesn't say you need different magic. It says your choices are your power." Harry considered this perspective. So it's not about finding some special spell or magical technique that Voldemort doesn't know. It's about approaching the conflict differently than he would. "Precisely," Luna agreed. "Voldemort sees only one path, domination through fear and pain. You see many paths, including those built on freely given love, trust, and sacrifice if freely chosen." "That actually makes sense," Hermione said, sounding impressed. "Tactical flexibility as a strategic advantage. But how does that help me actually defeat him?" Harry pressed. "He's still more powerful, more experienced, has more followers, is he, though?" Neville interrupted thoughtfully. "More powerful, I mean. He's been focused on one type of power, domination, control. But there are other types of magical power he's never bothered with because he doesn't value them." "Like what?" Ron asked. "Cooperative magic," Hermione suggested immediately. "Spells that require multiple casters working in harmony. Voldemort would never pursue those because he trusts no one enough to share magical control." "Healing magic," Ginny added. "It requires empathy, which he lacks entirely." "Protective enchantments based on willing sacrifice," Arthur contributed quietly. "Like Lily Potter's protection of Harry. Magical bonds of loyalty freely given, not coerced through fear," Neville said. "That's why the DA was so strong, we were there by choice, not compulsion." Harry listened, a new understanding dawning. All this time, he'd been thinking of power in Voldemort's terms: raw magical strength, knowledge of obscure spells, tactical advantage. But there were forms of power the Dark Lord had always dismissed as worthless, never bothering to understand or counter them. "So we build a strategy around the types of magic Voldemort disregards," he summarized. "Not trying to beat him at his own game, but playing an entirely different game he doesn't even recognize. And we do it together," Ron emphasized. "Not just you alone, facing him like some prophesied duel at dawn. That's the path Dumbledore was steering you toward, the sacrifice play. But the prophecy itself says there are other ways. This is all theoretical until we develop specific tactics," Hermione cautioned, "ever practical. But it's a philosophical foundation we can build upon." Harry nodded, feeling more optimistic than he had in months. Not because the threat of Voldemort had diminished, but because his perspective on facing that threat had expanded beyond Dumbledore's narrow vision of sacrifice and destiny. As the afternoon waned, they prepared to return to Hogwarts. Arthur embraced each of them in turn, saving Harry for last. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "Not just for your testimony today, but for how you've handled this entire situation with a maturity beyond your years." "I've had good examples," Harry replied, meaning it sincerely. Back at Hogwarts, they found the castle abuzz with news from the trial. The Evening Prophet Special Edition headline screamed, "Dumbledore to stand trial, Weasley sentenced to 3 years." Students gathered in common rooms and corridors, discussing the developments in excited whispers that died away whenever Harry or any of his friends approached. Harry was grateful when McGonagall intercepted them in the entrance hall, directing them to her office where they could have privacy from the curious stares. "You handled yourself admirably today, Potter," she said once they were settled with tea and biscuits. "Your testimony was both compelling and dignified." "Thanks, Professor," Harry replied. "I just told the truth." "Sometimes that is the most powerful thing we can do," McGonagall observed. "Now, I assume you'll want some time to process today's events before resuming normal activities? Harry considered this but shook his head. Actually, I'd like to get back to normal as soon as possible. Classes, Quidditch, DA meetings, I've lost enough time to Dumbledore's manipulations. I don't want to lose more. McGonagall's expression softened with approval. Very well. Regular classes resume tomorrow. And regarding the Defense Association, I believe it's time it became an official school club rather than a clandestine operation. With proper resources and scheduling. Really? Harry asked, surprised by this development. Indeed, McGonagall confirmed. Recent events have made it abundantly clear that students need practical defense training more than ever. And your leadership in that area has been exemplary, Potter. As they left McGonagall's office, Harry felt a subtle shift in his perspective. For weeks, he had been focused on what had been taken from him, his autonomy, his trust, his genuine emotional development. But now, he was beginning to see what he had gained in the aftermath, a clearer understanding of his own mind, stronger and more authentic relationships, and a new approach to facing Voldemort that wasn't constrained by Dumbledore's narrow vision. That evening, as he sat by the fire in the Gryffindor common room, Fawkes perched beside him, Harry found himself thinking not about the past and its betrayals, but about the future and its possibilities. The prophecy had spoken of choices, of multiple paths, of power that lay in decisions freely made. For the first time since learning of the prophecy's existence, Harry felt not trapped by destiny but empowered by it. The burden hadn't been lifted, Voldemort still had to be defeated, but the way forward was no longer a single, narrow path leading to sacrifice. It was a landscape of possibilities, limited only by his choices and courage. As his friends gathered around him, discussing plans for the expanded DA, strategies for the upcoming Quidditch match, and theories about types of magic Voldemort might be vulnerable to, Harry felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine hope. Not the desperate optimism of someone trying to convince themselves things would work out, but the grounded confidence of someone who knew they were finally on the right path, their own path. Fawkes trilled softly, as if in agreement with his unspoken thoughts. What do you think he's trying to say? Ginny asked, noticing the Phoenix's song. Harry considered the question seriously. I think he's saying we're on the right track, he replied. That truth, however painful, is always the foundation for moving forward. The Phoenix trilled again, more emphatically this time. Or maybe he's just hungry, Ron suggested practically, earning laughter from the group. As the evening deepened into night, Harry found himself increasingly aware of a subtle but significant change in his interactions with Ginny. The awkwardness that had lingered between them since the revelation was gradually fading, replaced by a comfortable camaraderie based on shared experiences and mutual respect. When she laughed at something Luna said, Harry noticed the sound for what it was, warm, genuine, pleasant, without the exaggerated reaction the potions had once induced, when her every gesture had seemed magical and captivating. He could appreciate her quick wit and fierce loyalty without feeling overwhelmed by manufactured infatuation. And occasionally, when their eyes met across the common room, he felt a quiet spark of something that might, in time and with patience, grow into genuine attraction. But unlike before, he didn't feel compelled to act on it immediately. They had time now, time to heal, time to discover their authentic selves, time to build something real if that's what they both eventually wanted. For now, friendship was enough, more than enough. It was a gift, freely given and freely received, untainted by manipulation or expectation. As his friends began to drift upstairs to their dormitories, Harry remained by the fire, Fawkes still perched contentedly beside him. Ginny was the last to leave, pausing briefly by his chair. Tomorrow's another day, she said simply. A day we get to choose for ourselves, Harry replied. She smiled, not the dazzling smile that had once seemed to light his entire world, but something quieter and more genuine. Exactly. Good night, Harry. Good night, Ginny. After she had gone, Harry sat watching the flames dance in the hearth, their movement reminding him of Fawkes's burning day that had changed everything. Fire that destroyed, but also renewed. Pain that cleared the way for healing. Truth that hurt, but also liberated. You knew all along, didn't you? He asked the Phoenix softly. That's why you revealed the potions. You knew we needed the truth, however difficult. Fawkes trilled in what seemed like affirmation, his intelligent eyes reflecting the firelight. Thank you, Harry said simply. For choosing truth over loyalty to Dumbledore. For staying with me through all of this. The Phoenix gently butted his head against Harry's hand, and he stroked the warm feathers, feeling the connection that had formed between them, a bond based not on manipulation or obligation, but on mutual choice and respect. Eventually, Harry made his way up to his dormitory, where his roommates were already asleep. As he prepared for bed, his gaze fell on Luna's dreamcatcher still hanging above his headboard. Whether it had any actual magical properties or not, he had slept better since putting it there, free from the disturbing dreams that had plagued him during the withdrawal period. He slid under the covers, aware of Fawkes settling on his perch nearby, a warm, protective presence in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, classes to attend, a Quidditch team to captain, a DA to officially reorganize, and always, the looming threat of Voldemort to address. But tonight, Harry could rest knowing that whatever came next, the choices would be his. Not dictated by potions, not manipulated by Dumbledore, not predetermined by a prophecy that had been selectively edited to limit his options. His future, with all its dangers and possibilities, was finally, truly his own. 2 months later, Harry stood at the edge of the Hogwarts lake, skipping stones across its smooth surface in the golden light of early summer. Exams were over, Dumbledore's trial had concluded with a 20-year sentence to Azkaban, and an uneasy calm had settled over the wizarding world as both sides in the coming conflict gathered their resources and planned their strategies. Fawkes, who remained Harry's constant companion, soared overhead, occasionally diving to skim the water's surface before rising again in a display of aerial grace. Show off, Harry called up to the Phoenix, who trilled what sounded suspiciously like laughter in response. Footsteps approached from behind, and Harry turned to find Ginny walking toward him, her hair gleaming copper in the evening light. Thought I might find you here, she said, picking up a flat stone and skipping it expertly across the water, 5 bounces to Harry's 3. Still brooding heroically? He laughed at her teasing tone. In the months since the revelation, they had rebuilt their relationship from the ground up, first as cautious acquaintances, then as genuine friends, and now as something comfortable that existed in the space between friendship and possibly something more. They took it day by day, neither rushing nor resisting whatever might develop naturally between them. Not brooding, Harry corrected. Strategizing. There's a difference. Ginny pretended to consider this. Does brooding involve more furrowed brows? Because if so, you were definitely brooding. Harry threw another stone, watching it bounce across the water. I was thinking about what comes next. After the school year ends. The question of summer arrangements had been complex. Harry would not, under any circumstances, return to the Dursleys, a decision fully supported by McGonagall, who had been horrified by the complete assessment of his home life that had emerged during the investigation into Dumbledore's guardianship. Have you decided? Ginny asked, her tone more serious now. Bill and Fleur's offer still stands. Shell Cottage has room, and the protective enchantments are strong. I know, and I appreciate it, Harry said. But I think I'm going to take Sirius's place in London. Remus has agreed to stay there too, and with the Fidelius charm still in place, it's about as safe as anywhere could be. Ginny nodded, understanding. You need your own space. Somewhere that's yours, without anyone else's expectations attached. Exactly, Harry agreed, grateful for her perception. Though I hope you'll visit. All of you. He glanced at her. If that wouldn't be too weird, given everything. It's only weird if we make it weird, Ginny replied pragmatically. Besides, Ron would come whether invited or not, and Hermione's already planning to reorganize the Black Library, so you're stuck with all of us regardless. Harry smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with potions and everything to do with the authentic connections he'd built with the people who mattered most to him. "Good," he said simply. They fell into comfortable silence, skipping stones side by side as the sun began to set over the forbidden forest. Fawkes eventually joined them, settling on a nearby rock and watching their stone-skipping competition with what looked like amused interest. "Have you heard from your mum?" Harry asked carefully. It was a sensitive subject, but one they'd learned to discuss openly as part of their new, honest relationship. Ginny nodded. "She writes every week. I've answered the last 3 letters." She picked up another stone, examining it thoughtfully. "It's still complicated. I'm still angry. But I'm trying to understand how she could have convinced herself what she was doing was right. How love can get so twisted that it becomes control. And have you understood it, I mean?" "Not entirely," Ginny admitted. "But I'm starting to see how fear plays into it. She was so afraid of losing more family in the war, so desperate to secure happiness for her children, that she convinced herself the ends justified the means. She skipped the stone hard, watching it bounce 6 times before sinking. I don't forgive her yet, but I think someday I might be able to." Harry nodded, respecting both her anger and her capacity for eventual forgiveness. His own feelings toward Molly remained complicated, a mixture of betrayal, understanding, and sadness for what her actions had cost her family. "What about Dumbledore?" Ginny asked. "Have you figured out how you feel about him yet?" Harry had been asking himself the same question for months. "I don't hate him," he said slowly. "I understand why he thought he was doing the right thing. But I don't trust him, and I don't think I ever will again." He paused, finding the words for something he'd only recently realized. "The worst part is that he might have been right about some things. Voldemort is a terrible threat. Sacrifices might be necessary to defeat him. Ginny and I might even have been good together naturally. But we'll never know," Ginny finished for him. "Because he took away our chance to discover that authentically." "Exactly," Harry agreed. "He could have guided without controlling. Advised without manipulating. Trusted me to make the right choices instead of making them for me." He threw his last stone, watching it skip across the water. "And that's what I can't forgive, not what he did, but the assumption behind it. That I couldn't be trusted with my own life." Ginny nodded in understanding. "For what it's worth," she said after a moment, "I think you're doing pretty well with your own life now. Leading the DA, preparing for Voldemort, maintaining relationships with all of us complicated Weasleys." She grinned. "You don't need anyone pulling your strings." Harry returned her smile, grateful for the lightening of the mood. "Speaking of the DA, are you coming to the special session tomorrow? We're practicing the cooperative shielding technique Hermione found in that ancient Greek text." "Wouldn't miss it," Ginny replied. "Though I'm still not convinced we can maintain a united shield while also casting offensive spells." "That's why we practice," Harry pointed out. "If we can master it, we'll have a tactical advantage Voldemort won't expect. His followers fight as individuals, they've never trained for cooperative magic." This approach had become central to their strategy against Voldemort, developing forms of magic that required trust, cooperation, and freely given commitment, qualities the Death Eaters fundamentally lacked. Whether it would be enough to overcome Voldemort's raw power and experience remained to be seen, but it gave them options beyond the sacrificial path Dumbledore had envisioned. As darkness began to fall, they made their way back toward the castle, Fawkes gliding above them like a fiery guardian. The corridors were relatively quiet, most students taking advantage of the pleasant evening to enjoy the grounds before end-of-term festivities began. "Harry," Ginny said as they reached the point where their paths would diverge, she to Quidditch practice, he to a strategy meeting with Ron and Hermione. "I've been meaning to ask you something." "What's that?" he asked, noting the slight hesitation in her voice. "When all this is over, Voldemort, the war, everything, what do you want? For yourself, I mean. Not what's expected of you or what others need from you." Just, what does Harry want? The question caught him off guard. For so long, his future had been defined entirely by external factors, the prophecy, Voldemort's threat, Dumbledore's plans. The concept of wants and dreams beyond survival was still foreign territory. I don't know, he admitted. I haven't really thought about it. Maybe you should, Ginny suggested gently. Give yourself something to look forward to. A future you're choosing, not just accepting. She reached out and squeezed his hand briefly, a gesture of friendship, of understanding, before continuing down the corridor toward the Quidditch pitch, leaving Harry with her question echoing in his mind. What did he want? As he made his way to the room of requirement where Ron and Hermione waited, Harry found himself genuinely considering the question for perhaps the first time. A life beyond Voldemort. Beyond prophecies and manipulations and others' expectations. When he entered the room, he found it had configured itself into a comfortable planning space, a round table covered with maps and books, comfortable chairs, a crackling fire despite the summer warmth outside. Ron and Hermione looked up from the ancient tome they'd been examining, their expressions lightening at his arrival. There you are, Ron greeted him. We thought you might have been kidnapped by the giant squid. Just talking with Ginny by the lake, Harry explained, taking his seat at the table. She asked me something interesting. Oh. Hermione prompted when he didn't immediately continue. She asked what I want after all this is over. What I want for myself, not for the war or because of the prophecy. Harry looked at his two oldest friends, the people who had stood by him through everything. And I realized I don't know. Ron and Hermione exchanged a glance that contained an entire conversation. Well, that's something we should figure out, isn't it? Ron said pragmatically. Give us all something to fight for beyond just survival. What do you want, Harry? Hermione asked softly. Harry closed his eyes briefly, allowing himself to imagine a future where Voldemort was defeated, where the weight of prophecy no longer pressed on his shoulders, where his choices were truly his own. I want. He began slowly, the vision taking shape as he spoke. I want to create something, not just destroy. To build connections instead of breaking them. To use what I've learned to help others who feel trapped or manipulated or alone. He opened his eyes, the vision clearer now. I want to teach, I think. Like with the DA, but more. To help people protect themselves, make their own choices, find their own strength. Ron nodded thoughtfully. You'd be brilliant at it. You already are. And what about personally? Hermione pressed gently. Beyond career aspirations? Harry considered this deeper question. I want a family, he admitted. Not immediately, not until I'm ready. But eventually, I want what I never had growing up, a home where people choose each other every day. Where love is freely given, not manipulated or coerced or conditional. Something tightened in his chest as he voiced these desires, not pain, but the bittersweet ache of longing for something worth fighting for. Then that's what we work toward, Ron said simply. Not just defeating Voldemort because the prophecy says so, but creating a future where all of that is possible. For all of us, Hermione added, her hand finding Ron's on the table, a gesture that spoke of their own evolving relationship, one built on years of friendship and choice rather than Dumbledore's abandoned protocols. Fawkes, who had followed Harry into the room, trilled softly from his perch near the fire, the phoenix song filling the room with a sense of possibility, of hope. As they turned to their planning, mapping Voldemort's likely hideouts, developing cooperative defensive techniques, preparing for whatever confrontation might come, Harry felt something settle within him. A certainty not imposed from outside but rising from his own heart. The prophecy had spoken of choice, and now he understood why that was so powerful. Because with choice came purpose. With purpose came determination. With determination came the strength to forge a path forward that was truly his own. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Voldemort, the remaining Horcruxes they had begun to research, the uncertainty of war, Harry would face them not as the pawn Dumbledore had tried to shape, but as the person he was choosing to become. Someone who recognized that true power lay not in control or manipulation, but in authentic connection, freely given trust, and the courage to make one's own choices even in the face of destiny. Fawkes's revelation had burned away illusion, painful as that process had been. But from those ashes, something new was emerging, something stronger, more genuine, more truly alive than anything that had existed before. Harry's future, reclaimed from those who would have scripted it for him, now lay open with possibilities limited only by his own imagination and courage. It was a future worth fighting for. Worth living for. Worth choosing, every single day. And in the end, that choice, made freely, with full awareness and authentic purpose, might prove to be the most powerful magic of all. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.